And at 10, Jim Gordon Batman. In the wake of Batman's apparent death against the Joker, plans for a new Batman were discussed, with Powers International laying the groundwork for a Batman-inspired task force. Their first candidate chosen to model this program was Jim Gordon, of course, who was initially hesitant to fill Batman's shoes but eventually agreed. Going through intense government training and getting surgical muscle implants, Gordon was given the first model of a new Batman robot armor, which he nicknamed Rookie, and took to the streets as the new Batman. By complete chance, he ends up finding Bruce Wayne and informs him that he's taken up the reins as Batman. As Gordon hears several different reports about Bruce Wayne being found dead throughout Gotham, he works with Batman to figure out that a Batman from an alternate dark universe, known as the Batman Who Laughs, is the one responsible. Tracking him down, Gordon seeks help from his estranged son, James Jr. However, another dark version of Batman arrives and introduces himself as the Grim Knight. But it's certainly jarring to see Batman go from like this big bulky hero to the lanky and, sorry to say, old Jim Gordon. He even looks fragile.
Number 9. Cyclops Lass. So Cyclops Lass might not be one of the most important characters on this list, but I still think she is a character you should get to know because, well, she's just a cool character. I really like Cyclops Lass. Cyclops Lass is Beatrice Buddy Bartholomew and is the leader of the Children of the Atom. By the way, it took me a minute to realize when I first heard of this fan-composed mutant-inspired teen hero team's name that their group name was another phrase used for mutants and even the X-Men back in the day. It's pretty cool when you realize that. Neat stuff. Cyclops Lass appears to have powers similar to the X-Men member and often leader, Cyclops, but in reality we learned that it was actually alien tech which gave her team their powers, allowing them to appear like mutants and like some of their favorite X-Men members. Still, Buddy is a cool character, and while Children of the Atom has ended, I do hope we get to see more of its team members. Buddy made her first cameo appearance in Marvel's Voices issue number 1 and her full appearance in Children of the Atom issue number 1. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want more mutant lists, please let us know by hitting that like button. It really does help us out at the channel, and it lets us know that you want more X lists, which honestly I like giving you all the X-Men things, so yes, let's do it. Number 8. Cosmar. Cosmar is one of the new mutants, if that makes sense. She first appeared in issue number 9 of the newest series from 2020. Currently there are 2 different groups of new mutants in that series, the one based on the mutant island nation of Krakoa, who are truly feeling those outcast vibes right now, and currently are like the Shadow King's lost mutant kids, and the other traditional new mutant team who is more focused on space adventures and other international exploits. When Cosmar's powers first manifested, it resulted in the death of her parents. Her powers cause her to suck people into her nightmares, as she creates a reality warping sphere surrounding her. All those who touch or interact with it run the risk of being sucked in. And I believe Forge actually made her a suit as well, as Forge is just making everybody little things to help them with their powers, to help her sort of control those powers so that they wouldn't be so disastrous. Number 7. Gimmick. Gimmick is a new mutant who first appeared and had her powers manifest in Children of the Atom. She was the one member of the team who actually ended up making it to Krakoa due to the fact that she was a real mutant, in addition to also being a major fangirl of the X-Men. But aside from her being a mutant, Carmen Cruz is also good friends with the fellow Children of the Atom, with Cyclops Lass, aka Buddy, probably being her best friend on the team and also her secret crush who she's in love with. Another thing that I love about Carmen is that she also is the person that makes all the costumes on the team, and she's super into cosplay, which I just think is like super cool and super cute. We don't have a lot of characters in the comics that are cosplayers, so I really liked that element. Gimmick's powers appeared initially to be similar to Gambit's, but this was all done using alien technology. In reality, when Carmen's mutant powers manifested, it was revealed that they were shapeshifting in nature and also granted her a healing factor. Carmen made her first cameo appearance in 2020 in Marvel's Voices issue 1, but would appear fully in the first issue of Children of the Atom the following year in 2021. Also, when she did have her Gambit powers, it was pretty cool because she was like throwing basically little like clothing pins, if that makes sense, at people, which I love. Number 6. Maxime and Manon. Maxime and Manon are relatively new characters and mutants who appeared within the last year, but we also now potentially have a different version of them in the current X books. They're likely from a different continuity due to what we learned during the Dawn of X period of the current line. Or There's like a version of them I think that's like 616, and then there's a version of them that doesn't actually have a reality number officially yet, but yes. Maxime and Manon, as we see them in the current timeline, are a brother and sister who together can heavily manipulate and warp the minds of others. Maxime can manipulate the emotions of his target, and Manon can manipulate and alter their memories, making the two a powerful duo when working in tandem. Maxime and Manon once served Ahab, being brainwashed into using their powers to make hounds for him. However, they would later be freed by Jean Grey, and Cable would convince her to look after them. Maxime and Manon are currently relevant because in the New Mutants series, they use their powers to make two humans attack one another and fight to the death, which is against Krakoan law. Ooh. However, nothing seems to have come from them taking this extreme action just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes around at some point.
Halfway through into number 5, Firestorm. Firestorm is the name used by transmuted people that were mutated by the Star Labs particle accelerator in a specific manner, who end up becoming the Nuclear Man. The first duo to form Firestorm was Ronnie Raymond and Martin Stein, but after Ronnie's death and Martin Stein's failing health because of spending a significant amount of time unmerged, Team Flash were able to track down Jefferson Jackson to substitute for Ronnie. And for anyone who knows Firestorm as Ronnie Raymond, you'd certainly be confused as hell while watching Legends of Tomorrow, at least if you didn't watch Flash first and understood what was going on. Since Jefferson, as far as I can tell, was a character created for the show since they killed off Ronnie Raymond. I believe that they did this because they wanted to use Firestorm in their planned spin-off for Legends of Tomorrow, but knew that Ronnie as a character would not be willing to abandon Caitlin again after being separated from the love of his life for so long already. So in essence, they had to kill him off to use Firestorm in Legends, which is unfortunate, but I guess kind of understandable. In it for Wild Dog. On the night that Damien Dark was killed, Renee called Child Services and asked to see his daughter, only to be rejected multiple times. After seeing Dark's death at the hands of the Green Arrow on TV though, he was inspired to take justice into his own hands, so Renee began acting as a vigilante, which really isn't gonna help you get your daughter back, dude. However, his antics were disapproved by the Green Arrow, who warned him to stay off the streets, but of course Renee didn't listen, and this is most of his character. When starting out, Wild Dog's costume was probably the most accurate in the Arrowverse. However, in season 6, his upgraded suit was very much not an upgrade according to some fans. Like, I get that you want comic accurate suits, I understand that, I do too, but the inability to let characters evolve and grow in the show or movie or medium that they're being presented in is very confusing to me. Like, yeah, start off with something comic accurate, but then move on to something else, because I want new stories. I want an adaptation. I want to see new spins on these characters. If I wanted everything to be comic accurate, I'd read the comic again. Like, I don't know what's the point. Like, why would you want so many things to be exactly the same? Why don't you just want cool stories, like more things that these characters can do that doesn't rely on any of the previous history? I liked his season 6 suit and was disappointed when he actually went back to his original one. However, that was in part due to his equipment being locked up after being confiscated by the FBI, so they made a good reason in universe as to why he went back to his old one, but it seems more realistic that he'd have the other one, because, you know, a jersey isn't really bulletproof. Getting close to the end, into number 3, Green Lantern. First appearing in Far Sector number 1 from January 2020, Sojourner Jo Malign is a member of the Green Lantern Corps. She's assigned to a sector so far from O that she's not sure if it's even been numbered, and she just refers to it as the Far Sector. After the first 2 months that she was at City Enduring, Jo had a relationship with Sins of the Cliffs, a Na female, which didn't work out very well and they preferred to continue as friends. And she recently became involved with Marth of the Sea, a Na male. Jo is also a reader of the website Tales of Our Own, a parody of the fanfiction site of Our World Archive of Our Own. She's also a fan of anime, so basically, just an awesome person turned into Green Lantern. But if you say Green Lantern, people typically think of Hal Jordan or maybe even Alan Scott. But Jo Malign is certainly another one that we should add to the roster and keep our eyes on, especially because her suit is pretty sick. Penultimately, into number 2, Roy Harper. When Roy Harper became a Black Lantern, I honestly felt like it was the biggest changing design for any character in the Black Lantern Corps, especially since it happened recently in Infinite Frontier, and he's alive. Following the events of Death Metal, a number of heroes and villains were brought back to life in the Infinite Frontier era. Among them included Jade and Arsenal, with the latter returning with all new powers. After being tracked down by the multiversal bounty hunter Extract, who was previously Green Arrow's powerless sidekick, punched them with a giant black energy blast, revealing that he'd taken on the powers of a Black Lantern. However, Black Lanterns are usually reanimated from the dead by their ring, while Harper is very much alive. While trying to sort all this out, Roy tries talking to the ring to get some answers, which ends up revealing that his daughter Leanne is still alive. Unfortunately, when he asks the ring to show him where she is, instead ends up saying where Darkseid is, and he's transformed into a monster
and changes, his symbol changes to like an omega symbol like Darkseid, and then he flies off. And finally, in at number 1, Swamp Thing. The new Infinite Frontier version of Swamp Thing is certainly something else, and it's really interesting. Known as Levi Kamei, after visiting his home and family in India, Levi grew connected to the green, becoming the new Swamp Thing. He's still learning to grasp his power and what it means to be the avatar of the green, but holy shit, his appearance is one of the most nightmarish Swamp Things I've seen. He's like the Hellspawn version of Swamp Thing. Like Black Lantern Swamp Thing, but still green. Yeah, and like kind of like that. Just like, Jesus Christ. If I hadn't been told that this was Swamp Thing, I would actually kind of have no idea. I would think that it's something that like Swamp Thing spawned, or like a hell version of Swamp Thing. Like, it's actually horrifying, and the stuff of nightmares. I used to make a lot of top 10 scary lists for top 10 gaming. Now it's all just FNAF. But this is probably the scariest thing that I've had to talk about on this list, or in a list in general, for a very long time. Except for William Afton's constant resurrections, but I'm sure none of you care about that. I know I don't, so I can only imagine how annoyed you are by me bringing it up. That's right, you thought you were safe watching Top 10 Nerd? So did I! But no, it's taken over my life, and that means that you have to deal with it too. So does Chris. Haha. And it's Matter Eater Lad. The reason you might not recognize the absolute DC icon that is Matter Eater Lad is because you're lame. No, actually, the last time this character appeared was over 10 years ago in the pages of a Supergirl comic from 2007. Matter Eater Lad was in essence the hungriest of hippos, but a human. Able to eat anything and everything he wanted. Like, need a hole through that chain link fence? I got you. You need this door out of the way? I got you again. This guy just got to eat, and honestly, I think it was really iconic. But there is always, I mean, there's actually like a person in real life with these powers, if you can believe it. This man would eat light bulbs and nuts and bolts, and he like actually ended up eating like a whole bike, and at one point like a small plane, from what I remember, called Mr. Eats All. So if you really want a way to not recognize the most famous superhero ever, Matter Eater Lad, check out Mr. Eats All. It's basically the same thing. And at 9, Wonder Girl. Yara Flor from the tribe of Amazons from the Amazon is the new Wonder Woman in Future State, who, in the absence of Princess Diana, came out of obscurity from the heart of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil to protect man's world from the magic that is within it. Yara Flor is a demigod who hails not from the island of Themyscira, but from the Amazon rainforest in South America. She has a faithful winged steed, Jerry, and along with her friend Kippora, a forest guardian spirit, Yara travels to the underworld to rescue one of her Themyscirian sisters from the clutches of Hades, the Olympian god of the dead. Yeah, a sister that she's never even met before. Yara is also an active member of the Justice League, although the new rules of the Justice League forbade fraternization amongst its members as a way to protect them individually and not have to go through the same tragedy that resulted in the dissolution of the previous League formation. Wonder Woman and Superman, John Kent, ended up becoming friends. It's also worth noting that despite always willing to work with her colleagues in the League, she's not happy to be a part of it. And it ain't Superboy. Now this seems like it's cheating since there are multiple people who use the Superboy mantle. However, the one that had the most makeovers has seemingly been Con-El, otherwise known as Connor Kent, with an E, because they're not cool like I am. If you read one version of Connor and then read a couple series later, you might not realize what's been going on. This man has gone through more looks than any teenager getting ready for a date in a Disney Channel movie. Not to mention the time where he merged with Spider-Man, after Spider-Man somehow defeated him. Superboy was created by Project Cadmus using Kryptonian DNA, intended as a replacement for Superman, who died fighting Doomsday. Artificially aged to his mid-teens and implanted with the equivalent of a high school education, Superboy was set free by the New Boys Legion before he could actually be implemented with safeguards to control him. One of the boys gave him a leather jacket before he set out to the city, where he had his first encounter with a villain when he found Sidearm attempting to steal money from an ATM. But since then, he's gone through like 2 other costumes and a load of different centuries, the most recent version coming from like the 30th century. So, yeah. And it's 7, Hippolyta. Hippolyta is the queen of the Amazons and ruler of Themyscira. She is also the mother of Wonder Woman. In the Harley Quinn animated series, Queen Hippolyta first appears in the episode Bachelorette, after being enslaved by Eris, who takes control of Themyscira and turns it into a spa resort, planning to sell it to Lex Luthor. However, Harley Quinn discovers her plan and along with her friends takes down Eris and saves the queen and Themyscira. To thank them and celebrate their victory, she throws a rager. And in Something Borrowed, Something Green, the queen appears as a guest
guest at Poison Ivy's failed wedding to Kite Man and the old Gotham corn factory alongside some of her subjects. But the Queen of Themyscira being mind controlled, that seems fairly ridiculous, okay? Even if she was mind controlled by the goddess of discord, at that point, she might as well have just been able to tell us what games our friends were playing, okay? Harley Quinn, like, they discovered her plan and took her down as a part of her bachelorette party for Poison Ivy. But if they could do that, how could Wonder Woman's mother not fight her off? Seems kinda lame. And at 6, Wally West. Wally's lightning color has shifted based on various circumstances before. After escaping the Speed Force, his energy shifted from yellow to white due to his connection to the Speed Force growing stronger. And Wally's lightning later evolved to an indigo blue cosmic energy, and this was most notable when he united with the Mobius chair. Learning his children were inhabitants of a new dark multiverse Earth created by his own fears of losing them, an Earth that Tempest Fugonaut was now tasking him with destroying. Wally spent one last day with his kids, spending a nice dinner with them and giving them one last kiss before deciding to make his move, knowing what needed to be done. So he forced Tempest to promise him to get his kids to the Earth once he acted, leading Wally to sit on the Mobius chair and obtain its knowledge and power. The new godlike Wally just watched stuff and then just kind of destroyed everything. But he also realized that the chair was now infused with the power of Dr. Manhattan, and he could just do more than just sit and watch. Yeah, an omniscient Flash? That's pretty traumatic.
Number 5, Bay the Blood Moon. Bay the Blood Moon is an awesome new character who made her first appearance in the Ten of Swords event back in the second main book from the event, Ten of Swords Stasis. She was one of the Arakko mutants who was called to compete in the Otherworld tournament, fighting to represent her nation. However, her fight actually ended up being a marriage. Basically, the Otherworld tournament was gloriously weird because it was being led by Saturnine. So we had traditional sword fights combined with lots of different kinds of battles, including puzzle solving duels, food eating competitions, dance-offs, and even an arranged marriage. However, it also all worked out as Cypher and Bay were seemingly both enamored with the other, as they were both masters of language and communication, but who struggled to understand one another, which fascinated them both, especially Cypher. They were both married and were each awarded a point, as it was considered a shared victory for both sides. Also, the art in the issue of Excalibur where they get married is just so good. It's so great. I love it. Number 4, Chen Zhao. Chen is not a mutant, nor is she an ally to mutant kind. She is just the opposite, their enemy. After coming up against the Marauders, trying to inspire mutant hate in her people as a public figurehead, billionaire, and anti-mutant activist, she ended up allying herself with Hom and his Verendi. Still hell-bent on destroying mutant kind's reputation as heroes, and now especially focused on doing harm to the band of mutant heroes that we know as the Marauders. Chen Zhao made her first appearance back in 2019 in Marauders issue 1, which once again, if you haven't read any of this comic, why not go back and start with that first issue in Chen's first appearance. Currently, Chen is Hominis Verandi's White Bishop, and she's definitely a villain that I think is going to be more prominent and keep getting like more badass, which I love. Number 3, Dolores Ramirez. Dolores Ramirez is another non-mutant, but someone who is a very important character within and around the X-Men universe currently. She is the head of the X-Desk, and no, I don't mean that she worked with Jonathan Hickman to bring our current line of X-Books to life. Within Earth 616, she is the one who presides over the United States government X-Desk, which monitors, keeps tabs on, and ultimately kind of spies on the mutant nation of Krakoa and its major players and political stratagems. The X-Desk is a department within the CIA. Dolores once offered to help fellow CIA agent Jeff Bannister, ally of Wolverine, who had been working with him, but he turned her down. Dolores was also one of the lucky few to get an invite to the Hellfire Gala and met with Storm in secret during her first appearance in Marauders issue 11, where she was rewarded for leaking some important information about poisoned medicine to the mutants. So while she's watching them, she also kind of seems pretty friendly. Number 2, Arakko. Arakko is both an island and a mutant, just like Krakoa. In fact, there was a time when both Krakoa and Arakko were joined together, but years ago they were separated. Arakko made their first appearance in Powers of X issue number 4, and later on we learn of all that went on there with the island, including the mutants who inhabited it and their connection to a vastly important mutant, Apocalypse. Following the Ten of Swords event, Arakko attempted to reunite with Krakoa, but both islands decided, they were no longer really interested in one another, and the time had basically changed them. They reluctantly rejoined until a more suitable option was found for Arakko and the mutants of Krakoa. In planet-size X-Men, some of the mutants banded together under the direction of Magneto to terraform Mars and move Arakko and its inhabitants, the mutants of Arakko, to the now alive live planet. That's what happens when you terraform a planet, you bring it to life again. I actually didn't know that Mars was considered a dead planet until I read Planet Size X-Men, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm also learning some science facts, which is great. Number 1. Genesis. One of the most badass of all the new characters we've gotten recently in the world of X-Men. Genesis is the long-lost wife of Apocalypse, who also was one of the main leaders of Arakko. She ended up fighting against Annihilation and becoming its new host in order to save her people, uniting both the Amenthi and the mutants of Arakko. Donning the mask, she became a leader of the Amenthi demon army, but also lost a part of herself in the process, as the Annihilation mask possessed and corrupted her. However, during the Ten of Swords tournament, she fought against her husband Apocalypse, who managed to free her from the golden helm of Annihilation, taking it for himself. But Apocalypse's will proved strong enough to resist its influence, and the mask was then transformed by Saturnine into a much less influential and corrupting staff, which was then gifted to Genesis. Genesis made her first full appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 12, but we wouldn't learn that she was Annihilation until much later. Number 10. Skin. I love me some Gen X mutants, which is why you know I need to talk about Skin on this list. Skin is a mutant whose mutation is basically just a bunch of extra skin. In the comics, it actually took a while for Angelo to be able to embrace his abilities, as he basically resented his powers and being a mutant. However, as time went on, he came to accept them and even became quite good at utilizing his extra skin and using it as a cool power. He could even use it to change the appearance of his shape and face, becoming somewhat of a shapeshifter. While Angelo Espinosa can stretch his skin, it should be noted that his skeleton does not change, making his power kind of a weird and unique one. Skin is also known for having literally thick skin that is more durable than most, as well as more elastic. Number 9. Husk. Paige Guthrie might not be one of the main heroes that you think of when you think X-Men, but for a time she was actually a close-knit part of that team, and even had a controversial romantic relationship with fellow X-Men member Angel, who, even though we don't talk about him as much, is one of the original members, so yeah. I even thought of like putting him on this list just because we never talk about him, but I was like, wow, that would be mad disrespect to Angel, so I couldn't do it. I can't lie, I'm actually really excited for the X-Corp series just because I am ready for Angel's return to the spotlight. Paige's powers are fairly unique in that she can shed her skin to reveal a new layer of skin made out of a different material beneath it. This new outer layer of skin can be made of anything that she wants it to be, such as wood, rubber, or even diamonds. Diamond skin is so cool. Just taking a page of Emma Frost's book there. Love it. Number 8. Hellion. So yeah, the early 2000s saw us go through a mutant boom. A boom that likely led to the events of House of M, which was probably used from a practical standpoint to kind of remove a good number of mutants because it was just getting, well, it was getting so out of hand with keeping track of all of these different mutants. We had so many. Too many maybe. Just kidding, you can never have too many mutants. Hellion was a part of this boom, and he took inspiration for his codename from his mentor Emma Frost's fallen group of mutants, the Hellions. Julian Keller is likely a mutant associated with the X-Men that we don't talk about as often because, well, he's kind of a jerk, and he's not as much of a lovable jerk as someone like Sunspot, so yeah. Julian possesses a unique version of telekinesis in that his powers are far more advanced and allow him to take control on a seemingly molecular level of different objects. They also come with a super cool color as well. Everything he does is like green with his powers. Unfortunately, when emotions get in the way of these powers, this level of telekinesis results in him sometimes combusting objects by accident or simply in anger. Hellion has made a return in Krakoa and has appeared in a few comics, but hasn't become a main member of any of the prominent teams featured there just yet. I personally think it'd be cool to see Hellion on the Hellions, but I don't know if he's like messed up enough to be on the Hellions. Number 7. Mercury. Mercury is another mutant to come from the bunch that Hellion was a part of. Julian was actually her first friend that she made when she arrived at the Xavier Institute. Mercury's, or Cecily Kincaid's, parents had sent their daughter there after her powers first manifested, ashamed that she was a mutant. Eventually they would actually end up disowning her after they themselves were pulled into a mutant conflict. Mercury's powers allow her to turn her skin into liquid metal, which she can then control, reform, and use to shapeshift with. This form is of course made up of non-toxic mercury, which is where she gets her codename from. Mercury was also one of the few mutants to keep her powers following the events of M-Day. In fact, I have quite a few of those on my list. Not all of them, but a few of them. Number 6. Darwin. Darwin has some of the coolest abilities, and yet he isn't often easily recognized as being one of the main members of the X-Men, even though he's been a part of the team for quite some time in the comics. For a long time he was actually stuck bonded to Vulcan, as he was part of one of the first teams of X-Men Xavier and Moira ever had. I don't know if we called that team the X-Men, but they're basically like another squad of X-Men in my mind, so. He was part of the first team sent in to rescue the X-Men from Krakoa, though we wouldn't find out about that team in terms of comic book history till many years after the events of the X-Men's printed fight against the mutant Living Island. Darwin's powers allow him to evolve as needed to ensure his survival. This basically makes him almost immortal, as he can evolve to resolve almost any life-threatening situation. Recently, in the current X-Men run in issue number 5, this is why Darwin was chosen to be one of the team members to be sent into the vault after Serafina, as it wasn't known how long the team sent in would be locked within that place where time moves more quickly in comparison to Earth. I feel like they also just came out recently, but I haven't read that issue yet, so no spoilers.
Halfway through in at number 5, Green Arrow. Haha, you knew this was gonna happen. The Arrowverse crossover event Crisis on Infinite Earths had been in the process of setup for a while, with the previous Elseworlds crossover just being one big commercial for it basically, and the seasons leading up to it revolving mostly around what could happen in Crisis. One of these issues was the death of Oliver Queen, which shockingly was carried out in the first part of the crossover. After bringing Oliver back to life at the Lazarus Pit on Earth 19, John Diggle, his daughter from the future Mia, and Constantine all traveled to Purgatory to retrieve his soul. But when he was about to go back with them, Jim Corrigan arrives with a way for Oliver to save everyone. This turns Oliver into the Spectre, basically the most powerful being in the multiverse, giving him the powers of a god, allowing Oliver to reboot the universe with the help of the Paragons, and also stopping the Anti-Monitor from securing the destruction of all Earths. He also ended up corrupting the Speed Force by empowering Barry, which resulted in the Speed Force dying for a time, which is a whole other can of worms I won't discuss. But needless to say, you wouldn't recognize this version of Green Arrow, especially since he's dead and you can't really see him. And at 4, Black Lightning. In Dark Knights of Steel, Superman finds his way to a medieval Earth where familiar DC favorites are recast in the Middle Ages. Batman is a young prince and John Constantine is an oracle. But perhaps the most unique transformation is that of Black Lightning, who now is a king, pursuing a mysterious agenda against Superman and his family. The character has not been regularly seen in the comics for some time, but returns in Dark Knights of Steel, which has got to be my personal favorite Earth so far, because medieval, Cheese King, you get it. This time, Supes' parents actually made it to Earth along with him, and in the Kingdom of Storms, Kal-El's birth has triggered horrifying visions in a young John Constantine. As Constantine lays writhing on the ground, his mind is overwhelmed and he's dictating his visions to the royal scribe. The king arrives and readers see that it's Black Lightning. He's concerned over Constantine's visions and tells the scribe to write down everything the boy says. As Constantine comes out of his trance, he tells Black Lightning that the end is near. This is a pretty damn badass version of Black Lightning, similar to Black Panther in a way, since now Jefferson is rightfully a king. Respect. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Wonder Woman. The Dark Knight's death metal story wrapped up early 2021 with issue number 7, and in that issue and the issue before, we see Wonder Woman at her most powerful, in a godlike form that's even more powerful than a god. As the comic puts it, quote, "She has been a god before, but at this moment she's more. At this point she has ascended past godhood and can see all of time and all realities." Okay, she sees like every Earth's timeline, and she faces off against the Batman who laughs in his most powerful form as well. This fight is so intense that they hit each other through time itself. Diana here is charged with anti-crisis energy, a connective force that links all history and all lives as one story. Then she moves on to become one of the hands that created the multiverse going forward, with no walls and greater possibilities. She aids in creating the future state story we see in the next issues, and what was seemingly the centerpiece of DC 2021. So Wonder Woman becoming a god and remaking the universe, while very Oliver Queen as Spectre, still a pretty damn dramatic change. Penultimately, in at number 2, Dreamer. Nia Nal, also known by her code name Dreamer, is a fictional superhero from the Arrowverse television series Supergirl, portrayed by Nicole Maines. The character is based on and is depicted as an ancestor of the DC Comics character Noura Nal, also known as Dream Girl. She debuts in the 4th season of the series, and Nia Nal is the first transgender superhero on television. In March 2021, it was announced that Nia Nal would feature and make her comic debut in a story written by Maines to be published in a Pride-themed comic book anthology on June 8th, 2021. Mostly, you won't recognize her because she was a character really created by the show, even if she was intended to be a present version of Dream Girl. Nia Nal's powers include precognition and astral projection. On July 21st, 2018, trans activist and actress Nicole Maines was announced in the role at the show's San Diego Comic-Con panel. It was also confirmed that Nia would become the superhero Dreamer and that she is an ancestor of the Legion of Superheroes member Nura Nal. Maines described Dreamer as having this ferocious drive to protect people and to fight against discrimination and hatred. She's the superhero we need right now. The character is the first transgender superhero on television, and honestly, I think that it was worth it for this list. And finally, in at number 1, Batman. Batman in Dark Knights of Steel, a new limited series from DC featuring your favorite heroes and villains as medieval knights, has made a load of changes to the character in this world. One of the biggest changes being to Batman. Bruce is the knight assigned to protect the king and queen of House L, as well as their son Cal, like how Link was assigned to protect Zelda in the story Breath of the Wild. However, he seems to be more than just a mere man, able to withstand a banshee cry, in this case being Black Canary's cry. When it really should have killed him, he only bled from his ears. Even he was confused and worried that he had magic inside him, so he told Jor-El, who came to Earth along with his wife and son before Krypton exploded, that he should be banished for their sake. That's when, spoiler alert for the first issue, it's revealed that Bruce is really the result of an affair between Jor-El and Martha. So Batman is now part Kryptonian, while also basically being a Witcher. Oh wait, hold on, okay. He's ostracized because he's a bastard, and now he's secretly part Kryptonian? Yeah, Bruce Wayne is literally a Witcher, confirmed.
Number 10, Louise. Louise is not a major character in terms of being a huge mutant or key villain to mutants in the current series, but she is someone who will likely end up becoming a close friend and ally of Wolverine's. She first appeared in issue number 1 of the newest Wolverine series that started in 2020. I actually remember reading that first issue when I was in New York City right before the world went crazy. Oh my, what a time. Memories. Louise is a member of the Night Guard, and while she dropped off after issue 1, as we keep coming back to Dracula and the vampire nation's going-ons in the Wolverine series, she too has resurfaced. Louise was given a suit by Forge to help slow her transformation into a vampire after she and her Night Guard were attacked and either killed or turned. She once more teamed up with Logan as they went head-to-head with Dracula and his loyal subjects, and likely she'll be back again as this slow burning story continues to be developed. In fact, I think this is going to be like the big story before the end of this current Wolverine series, whenever we get there.
And at 9, Batman. The Arrowverse Batman may have an iconic voice in Kevin Conroy, but the version of Batman introduced in the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover on Earth 99 is not like any version of Batman you probably remember. I mean, except for the Kingdom Come one. He was the cousin of the late Kate Kane and Beth Kane, who spent his lifetime protecting Gotham City as the vigilante Batman, stylized as the Dark Knight. Unfortunately, this Bruce succumbed to his homicidal urges and killed the majority of his enemies, including this Earth Superman, whom Bruce's xenophobia caused him to incorrectly perceive as a threat. His career was thus seen as a reign of terror and its end celebrated. He also killed the Joker, the Riddler, and Mr. Freeze. Despite his moral decline, Bruce was believed to be the paragon of courage, until it was revealed that it was actually Earth 1's Batwoman who became the paragon after protecting Earth 38's Supergirl from the misguided fallen hero, accidentally killing Bruce in the process. Although, I'd understand why they thought Bruce was the paragon of courage, because you know, he took on Superman without any powers, which realistically should have gotten him killed. In an 8, Elongated Man. In the pre-Flashpoint timeline, Ralph was one of the 17 people who lost his life during the Star Labs particle accelerator's explosion. However, he reappeared alive in the post-Flashpoint timeline, gaining his powers due to exposure to dark matter from the Speed Force when Barry's team got him out of the Speed Force prison. Using these powers, Ralph joined Team Flash and began acting as a meta-human vigilante and superhero, initially referred to by the media as the Stretchy Man, but shortly thereafter being named Elongated Man. Well, while his powers may have all been a part of DeVoe's plan, the prototype suit that Ralph wears certainly wasn't, since this is one of the most cringily horrific suits in the entire Arrow multiverse. I mean, like, that was the point of it. The characters even ended up making fun of it in the show, but that doesn't excuse the fact that if you saw this suit and were a fan of Elongated Man, you'd still have no idea who he was. Not to take into account the majority of casual fans who might watch the show who wouldn't know who Elongated Man is to begin with. And at 7, Batwoman. Okay, so this is a bit of a cop-out, but hear me out, okay? Kate Kane is Batwoman, no news there. But after season 1 of the Batwoman show, the actress playing Kate, Ruby Rose, left the show for at the time undisclosed reasons, later revealed to be horrific working conditions for not only her, but the crew as well. So, they replaced her with Ryan Wilder, a new character who would take on the Batwoman mantle since Kate left Gotham. The latter returned, but with a new actress and the explanation that she had been disfigured when her private jet exploded. So honestly, in the most serious definition of the phrase, you wouldn't recognize her if she hadn't been introduced as Kate. Plus, she eventually gets brainwashed and turned into Cersei Sionis and given an entirely new face, so yeah, you won't recognize this version of Kate Kane. And at 6, Superman. Calvin Ellis, the Kryptonian named Kal-El, also known as Superman, is a Kryptonian president of the United States on Earth 23. On this Earth, he became Superman in addition to being the president. It is likely that he's native to Vathlo Island due to his reference to the word Vathlo. He operates from the White House where Brainiac serves as his personal computer and even covers for him when he's out doing stuff as Superman, and has recently made another appearance after Infinite Frontier, helping Justice Incarnate protect the multiverse, or I guess the Omniverse. Calvin Ellis was based on Barack Obama, the 44th president of the United States. Prior to being elected though, he once joked on TV that he was sent to Earth from the dying planet Krypton by his father Jor-El. He was later added to Final Crisis number 7 as a version of Superman. Writer Grant Morrison confirmed that the character was intended to be Barack Obama, and much like Obama, he's back when we needed him the most. So glad this version of Kal-El is back.
Number 5. Trance. Trance is another mutant who is affiliated with the X-Men and even tried out to become an X-Men in training under Emma Frost, following the events of House of M. She was one of the lucky few, or unlucky few I guess depending on your perspective, to remain powered. Hope Abbott, or Trance, possesses the power to leave her physical body, becoming ghost-like in appearance on panel, but in reality she's just astral projecting. In other words, she's not as powerful as some other mutants who are able to astral project as, you know, part of their larger set of powers, generally being telepathic or telekinetic in origin. But hey, not everyone can astral project, so I still think this is pretty cool. I also like when people don't have like crazy awesome powerful things and then you still have to see them like try to figure out, how do I use this in a way that's cool and, you know, good, so I can be on the same level. I think that's cooler to read, but that's just me. Number 4. Stacy X. Although Stacy X hasn't made a ton of appearances, she is a memorable character due to her, interesting and sensual abilities. Former abilities, I guess I should say. We don't really know if she has been returned to the status of a mutant, but we do know that she has joined the mutant nation of Krakoa now. So considering that when we last saw her, she was missing those abilities that she used to have in her former appearance, I assume that she has participated in the Crucible, was killed by the mutant formerly known as Apocalypse, and has been resurrected as her former self. But also, there are a lot of people in line to just be returned to us, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in line to participate in the Crucible to earn their powers back, so who knows? Who knows where she is in that long line. Also, Apocalypse is no longer on the island following the events of Ten of Swords, so there is that. I don't know who's running the Crucible now. Who is like the replacement Apocalypse. Stacy X was part of the X-Men for a brief period after being rescued by them from her place of work, which was attacked and destroyed by the Church of Humanity. Stacy X used her powers at her place of employment to help make clients who came through feel good and grant them sensations of pleasure. She can also use her pheromone powers in combat to make her opponents feel not so good, manipulating their bodily functions. She makes you feel sick. Blech. Number 3. Loa. Loa is one of the resurrected mutants to rejoin us on Krakoa, reborn again. While you may not know her as well as some of the others, she has a long and storied past with both the X-Men, her fellow mutants, good pals Rockslide and Match, and even with Namor. In fact, Namor was the one who came to save the day after she first discovered her powers. Loa's abilities allow her to pass through other matter and in so doing destroy it on a molecular level. She discovered she had these powers when her dad was attacked by a shark while they were surfing together, and she passed through it, destroying it. Namor would later come to her and her father's rescue before the situation could escalate, and it was later revealed that her grandmother was actually an old friend of Namor's. Since then, she also gained the ability to breathe underwater after being exposed to the Atlantean amulet. The amulet also allows Loa's physiology to adapt so that she can survive in the depths of the ocean easily. Number 2. Match. You might know the Pyros, but do you know Match? Natch. Natch is Ben Hamill, one of the mutants to appear in the new X-Men series, but making his first appearance in New Mutants. His powers are pyrokinesis, hence his name. It basically gives him control over fire, which he himself can generate, and also helps to make him immune to fire attacks and heat. Natch is now not as hot on the radar, but was for a time the leader of the X-Men adjacent team, the Paragon Squad. He also participated in a competition for a place on Emma Frost's X-Men team, and has attended both the Xavier Institute and the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. I'm not sure if it's of or for, because of feels weird to me, but I think it is right. It's of or for, it's one of those. Number 1. Lifeguard. Lifeguard is Heather Cameron, a mutant who, as a response to life-threatening danger, gains the skills and powers necessary to save those lives around her. This power, or powers, not only works for her in regards to saving others, but also is a reactive power that applies to saving her own life, meaning she can get out of pretty much almost any kind of dangerous situation that she puts herself in. Before lifeguard was her codename, it was actually her profession, as she worked as a lifeguard in Australia where she lived with her brother Davis. Eventually it was also implied in the comics that she has unknown Shi'ar heritage. We've seen her resurface in Dawn of X, popping up in Krakoa at the Green Lagoon bar, but it would also be super cool to see her play more of a prominent role at some point in the comics, as her powers are pretty neat and definitely super useful. But maybe too powerful? Maybe that's why we haven't seen her as much. Like Hope.
Kicking off the list at number 10. Juggernaut. Kane Marco made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12, when Kane and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Kane was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. The cave was actually home to the lost temple of Sidorak. So Kane grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol. Apparently he's never seen an Indiana Jones movie. He read the inscription. Apparently he's never seen a horror movie. And he possessed the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Then an explosion went off, and then Kane the Juggernaut was now trapped under the rubble, and Xavier just took off. So after Kane dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village, with the previous man who had held the Juggernaut mantle, Jin Taiko, being destroyed as well. Now at one point he joined the X-Men and accepted Xavier's offer to live at the Xavier school. After a young boy he befriended named Sammy meets his fate, Kane embraces the Sidorak energies once again and went back to his villain ways. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. It helps the studio out quite a bit. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to this X-Men list. Number 9, Mystique. Raven Darkholme made her first comic book debut in Miss Marvel issue 16 back in 1978. So she's been around for quite a while, although most of her history is quite secretive. Her powers are quite interesting and first came to be when she was around 12 years old. Now one of those powers being of course that she can metamorph. So she can shapeshift into literally anybody, doesn't matter what size, age, gender, whatever the case. She's so good at shapeshifting and becoming somebody else that she can even copy your retina patterns and of course your fingerprints. So she can definitely get into your phone in numerous ways. She constantly betrays the X-Men. She's so flippy floppy. She joins the team for selfish reasons and then she leaves all over again. It's part of the thing. Number 8, Colossus. Making his first debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, Colossus grew up in Russia with his brother Miko and sister Alina. And when a runaway tractor was about to take out Alina, he saved her life with his powers. And then of course that got the attention of Charles Xavier. So he joined Charles in his school, and then when the legacy virus took the life of Alina, that plus the fact that he was stuck in this giant metal mode, stuck in the X-Men mansion, it was his mental breaking point. He tipped to the dark side. He left and figured the best place to be was with the Acolytes, with Magneto and Avalon. Number 7, Wolverine. Wolverine has had a pretty crazy past, so it's no surprise that he's gone down a few dark roads in his time. In the movie Logan, for example, we see two Wolverines battle it out, and it's so gory and so wonderful. But in the comic Age of Apocalypse, Logan goes from being an X-Men to the Horseman of Death. Yeah, Apocalypse actually had Wolverine square up against Sabretooth in order to see who becomes this new Horseman. Wolverine came out on top, and Apocalypse restored the adamantium to his skeleton. Upgrade time, let's do it. And to make matters worse, Apocalypse replaced Wolverine with a scroll so the X-Men wouldn't notice. Now of course there's many more X-Men who have become Horsemen of the Apocalypse, such as number 6, Gambit. Making his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men 266, Remy LeBeau was a mutant child who was kidnapped from the hospital by members of the New Orleans Thieves Guild. So off the bat, not a happy start to his life. They referred to him as the White Devil. So before he joined the X-Men, he had a pretty shady past, and after he had become a member, it was revealed that before he had worked for Mr. Sinister, and Gambit was actually the one who was responsible for putting the Marauders into the New York sewers where the mutant massacre happened. So, okay. He was also one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, like I said previously. He took the place of the horseman Death, and he even refused any sedation during this process in order to make sure Apocalypse doesn't toy with his mind. What a badass. Dude's hardcore. His original plan during this was to keep an eye on Apocalypse from the inside, but the transformation did alter his intentions as well. He ended up rescuing his old self when he remembered his love for Rogue, and he claimed he was both Death and Gambit at the same time. What a troubled man. Number 5, Bishop. Lucas Bishop. He is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal was to travel back in time to the past in order to stop an unknown traitor amongst the X-Men. Interesting, very interesting. So he's come from that dark future to change it. Sounds like a good way to mix things up, that's for sure. Now this was when most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch. Then the child Hope was born, the first mutant born since. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back. See, that kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop tries to take out the child, which makes him the traitor all along. Time travel hurts my head, oh my god. So Cable, another time traveler from a different future, protects Hope. Bishop fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating a new future where Cable is remembered as a hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was remembered as the villain. That's tragic and also very confusing. Number 4, Archangel. Warren Worthington III. He started out as the accustomed hero known as the Avenging Angel. And then once Xavier got his attention, he recruited him as the 3rd of the 5 founding members of the X-Men, alongside Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, and Marvel Girl. He developed a pair of feathered wings that grew out of his back, giving him the ability, of course, to fly. He became a member of X-Factor alongside other X-Men, but he lost his wings thanks to Cameron Hodge. See, Apocalypse saw this and he took advantage of the hero. He brainwashed him and turned him into Archangel, the first horseman of death in the comics. He eventually broke free of Apocalypse's control, but over the years he would flip-flop back and forth into the evil hands of Apocalypse. He at one point actually had almost replaced Apocalypse after his death. Yeah, he's a force you do not want to mess with. Number 3, Cyclops. Scott Summers has been a leader of the X-Men since the beginning. He carries the knowledge that Xavier gifted him when he was a teenager. He was always struggling to control his powers growing up, and his history is pretty tragic. So when Scott and Emma became the new co-headmasters of the school, Cyclops led the X-Men, and he was doing a pretty good job. He was working to destroy this negative image that the public gave the X-Men. And as time went on, the X-Men name was being tarnished, so he thought it was best to separate mutants from humanity. Yeah, he thought he'd separate them and then rule the mutants on an island nation known as Utopia. Magneto even gives him props for uniting all the mutants. I mean, this is a big deal for him. This starts going south in the Schism storyline, where Cyclops sends out child soldiers on these assassination missions. He has the mindset that mutants need to train to be soldiers rather than students, but they're like 12 years old, so it's like, okay. Eventually the team gets divided and Scott ends up taking on the powers of the Phoenix Force, fighting the Avengers and taking out Xavier, resulting in him being imprisoned. Number 2, Magneto. Making his first appearance in X-Men 1 back in 1963, Magneto is a mutant with the ability to generate and control magnetic fields. He's a master of magnetism. He was a close friend with Professor X, but of course they came to a disagreement over the idea that humans and mutants could coexist peacefully. Like I just mentioned, he was a fan of when they got divided. He gave Scott Summers props for doing this, so he's clearly on board with this idea. And obviously his horrible childhood makes a fair point for said argument. He always believed that mutants were superior to humans. He was the one who created the Brotherhood of Mutants and the Acolytes. He worked with the X-Men before. See, when Professor X needed to leave Earth, Magneto stepped in to take his place and teach his students how to use their powers. After this, he became a hero in a way. He was guiding these new mutants. But again, he's one of those villains that constantly flips back and forth in the comics, and I'm really hoping he somehow is the one responsible for all this madness in WandaVision. After all, now that Quicksilver is somehow in the picture from the Fox universe, one can only hope we'll see some more X-Men, and one can only wish that Magneto will come through and maybe give his daughter a little talking to. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey. The Dark Phoenix, of course, she is number 1. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. She was also one of the OG members of the X-Men. Now, seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in danger during a space mission with the Fantastic Four. It's X-Men 101. Like literally, the issue is X-Men 101. Dark Phoenix has now entered the chat. Uh-oh. So much power. Okay, this dark, powerful cosmic force started to change her for the worse. She ended up destroying a solar system that, you know, kind of killed billions. And then she took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Now, a few years later, it was revealed that it wasn't actually the Jean Grey that had died. No, just the Phoenix as a separate entity that had taken over her mind and all that jazz. The Phoenix Saga is one of the biggest transformations to an X-Men member, and we even got to see all this go down on screen. Now, of course, we have to put her at number 1. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Multiple Man. James Madrox. He made his first comic book appearance in Giant Size Fantastic Four, issue 4, and right off the bat, he seems very soft-spoken. He seems very gentle. I mean, the Thing is yelling at him, and he's literally like, "Why do you reject me? Why?" Like, he's so almost poetic in a way. And then when the Thing goes to clobber him, bam, there's multiple more men. Now, he wasn't used very much in the X-Men, but he spent most of his days with X-Factor. But this guy is underrated. His powers may seem kind of weak compared to somebody like Jean Grey, but these duplicates can each make a duplicate.
Let me try something. I'm Mr. Meeseeks. Look at me. I'm Mr. Meeseeks. I'm Mr. Meeseeks. Look at me. Hi.
At one point, this guy had 40 of him running around town. 40. Now, the duplicates think, they feel, and they act independently, but they're guided by the original James Madrox. In a way, they're guided. They like kind of know what to do. Each of these duplicates manifests one aspect of James' personality, and the longer the time away, the more those traits become extreme. And if one of these duplicates passed away, he can sense that the general area where the body is, which is like the saddest radar ever. This guy could take over the world if he wanted. It would be like that scene from The Matrix, but with more monologues probably. And before we go on to this list of X-Men you probably wouldn't expect to be that powerful, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, just right there, just give it a little tap tap, and it helps our studio out quite a bit. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get back to the list. Lickety split. Number 9, Darwin. We saw this next mutant for a hot minute in X-Men First Class. He was played by Eddie Gathegi, who unfortunately didn't survive too long. See, he threw his life down on the line in order to protect his fellow X-Men. And this was still in the early days too. What a champ. He first showed up in the comics in 2005 with X-Men Deadly Genesis issue 2. Armando Munoz looked a lot different than we saw on screen as well. Since he was 4 years old, he was bald, his arms were super long, and his eyes were changing. He sure looks a little bit different than the young, handsome actor that we saw in the movie. His ability comes in handy a lot actually, more so in the X-Men movies. See, in the comics, he's practically immortal. His ability once allowed him to survive Hela's death touch. I mean, it's a little bit different than the last time we saw him, that's for sure. Number 8, Caliban. An albino mutant and former member of the Morlocks, Caliban made his first comic book appearance in Uncanny X-Men 148. So he has the ability to track down any mutant. He actually sacrifices himself in the movie Logan, where Stephen Merchant played him. He was also in X-Men Apocalypse for a bit too, played by a different actor. He was played by Tomas Lamarcus. He was originally an ally to the X-Men, but once he became a tracker for Apocalypse in X-Factor issue 24, titled The Fall of the Mutants. So he's pretty powerful, and he's done a lot of cool stuff too. He may seem like a gentle, lanky, pale man, but when Caliban is stressed out in the comics, he gains 2 additional powers: super strength and fear absorption. So if you put him in a corner, he'll be able to absorb the psionic energy in your fear and use it to power himself up even more. Number 7, Glob Herman, aka Robert Herman, although Glob is much more fun to say. He made his debut in New X-Men issue 117, and he grew up with a father who despised mutants, so already he's off to a pretty rocky start. So when Glob mutated, his father was just not on board, so his mother drove Glob out to Westchester and just left him for Professor X. Like you leave a baby at a fire station, it's just like, yep, here you go, your problem now. This mutation was interesting. So his skin was this transparent living wax, which he's able to maintain being on fire, which is pretty amazing off the bat. You can light him on fire and he's good to go. That's amazing. He runs with the New Mutants now, and although his name is silly and he's literally a glob, he can also possess powers of super strength and super speed, despite how he may look. So he can get hit by these massive bombs like it's nothing, then he can fight whoever launched that bomb with ease. The X-Men literally once used him as a heat shield once. They strapped Glob to the front of their ship, and it didn't seem pleasant for a man Glob, but he was good. He didn't die or anything. He had to rest for a bit. Number 6, Toad. When you think of the name Toad in relation to a superhero, you're gonna picture something pretty silly in your head. And Mortimer Toynbee isn't that far off from what you'd think. He made his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men issue 4. So he hops around, which seems silly, but his legs are so strong that he can leg press 3 tons. And it's not just his legs that are strong, his upper half possesses superhuman strength as well. His arms can lift about 1 ton. He also has flexible bone structure, regenerative healing factor, infrared vision, and the best part, his 30-foot long tongue can also act as a whip. And it can secrete venom that can give him mind control over your body, and his saliva is acid as well.
Number 5, Scarecrow. Scarecrow already looked pretty terrifying in the comics, but now he looks intimidating as well. Very intimidating. Not just maniacal and crazed. We got a fresh look at the Scarecrow redesign in previews for Infinite Frontier, and then in all his glory in the actual comic itself in issue 0. Here, Scarecrow appears to wear a gas mask with straw or sticks coming out of his head, almost like a crown. He is armed with long fingernails or claws at the end of his gloves, evoking a sort of Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street feel, especially as these claws seem to be directly connected to vials of fear toxin, which have tubes connecting to Scarecrow's headpiece? That's what it looks like to me. I think the idea is possibly that Crane is producing the fear toxin himself from his own mind and sending it down to these vials to be dispersed whenever he manages to scratch an enemy with one of his needle-pointed claws. All in all, it's a pretty intense look that might leave you asking who this character is, but kind of in a good way, as I consider this redesign to be an upgrade to the villain. Number 4, Catwoman. Catwoman in Batman Earth 1 has come in with a wild new look that will leave you floored. I mean, you will admittedly still recognize her, just not as the Catwoman that you're used to seeing. This version of Catwoman, instead of wearing her typical black or dark purple catsuit, looks a lot more noticeable and bold by comparison in terms of her design, especially for a thief. Here we see Catwoman donning a purple crop top and hot pants with striped thigh-high socks. She still sports a purple color motif at least though, so that helps with the recognition. Also, she has a paw print belt buckle and a cat mask, a literal cat mask, and she's got a cat on her shirt. Still, this look and redesign for the character is definitely very different. Very unique, I would say. Number 3, Bane. Really, Bane's daughter goes by the alias of Vengeance, but she definitely looks and seems to be following in her supposed father's footsteps. Bane's daughter was first introduced in the new Joker series in issue number 2, and is revealed to be the daughter of the supervillain who went through a series of experiments to give her super strength like her dad. Her mission is to get revenge for his death, and she's doing so by hunting down the Joker, who she and many others believe was responsible for the events and many deaths of A-Day. Her father, who was in Arkham Asylum at the time, was one of the victims of that attack and died. So Bane Jr., aka Vengeance, is out for blood. Number 2, Clayface. You really won't recognize Clayface in the new Batman Earth 1 volume. Clayface is not very recognizable here in terms of the story, as he is disguised for most of his appearance and in terms of his character design. Near the end of the story, we learn that Adrian Arkham, Bruce's grandfather, who returned from the dead, was in actuality Clayface in disguise. We're all used to seeing more of a giant mud monster when it comes to how Clayface is depicted, but instead, here we get a very kind of, I don't know, smooth looking baldy figure in the end, who appears to really kind of just be a man. Like a man who can shapeshift, but just a guy. Like a guy who, if you saw him on the streets, you wouldn't run in terror from him or anything. You might just notice his skin was like a little odd looking in terms of its texture, but that's about it. Other than that, he looks pretty average. Number 1, Two-Face. The Earth 1 version of Two-Face sees the character completely reinvented in a way you might not have expected, which is what makes it so great. On Earth 1, Harvey and his sister Jessica are working together to clean up Gotham alongside their good friend Bruce Wayne. After Harvey ends up dead, however, Jessica and Bruce are forced to continue their mission to eradicate corruption and crime in Gotham without Harvey, working on in his honor. But Harvey lives on in more than just their intentions. It turns out that Jessica develops a dissociative personality disorder, in essence becoming her brother due to the trauma of his loss. At least that's what it seems like if we had to explain it on paper. Although never explicitly called Two-Face, the duality of this version exists in the goodness of Jessica and the contrasting ruthless aggression of Harvey. Honestly, the story is so good, you really need to check out the new Batman Earth 1 Volume 3, because even knowing where this story goes, even though I just told you that part, it's still an amazingly compelling read, so go read it, even though you kinda know spoilers now. Number 10, Harley Quinn. While Harley Quinn's character design and costume has been changed, it's pretty similar to a lot of looks we've seen her in the past. Mostly what we're seeing in her new series is a change to art style, and with her new role as Batman's ally and sidekick, a complete shift over to the side of being a hero. Harley is of course still bringing her unique approach to heroism, so don't panic if you are a fan of Harley's wackiness and standout personality. But considering where she came from, being Joker's sidekick, this is a pretty big change to her character as we originally knew her. If you've been out of the comics for some time and aren't quite as well versed in Harley Quinn's history, you might not recognize her in 2021 as she's gone from full villain to full hero. Number 9, Poison Ivy. Over the last few years, Ivy has gotten a few pretty drastic redesigns, so if you are reading her in 2021 from anywhere along her recent history in the past 3 to 5 years, you might be a little confused when it comes to her look and ask yourself, wait a minute, is that Ivy? Also, who's Queen Ivy? We've seen her go from eco-villain to hero and environmental activist and spokesperson to dead to alive, and split down the middle between those two warring personas, the villain and the hero, when we literally got 2 Ivies. Then from there she became Queen Ivy and got a complete redesign when it came to her costume. Now she's back to wreaking havoc on Gotham, or is she? Time will tell what alignment we'll see for Ivy in the future. But either way, I'm here for the ride. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want to learn about more cool redesigns and updates to characters that we've seen recently, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Especially in the Batverse, I feel like there's so many Bat characters that have been introduced and redesigned, it's awesome. Number 7, Black Mask. Black Mask not only has a new look and redesign, in future state that is, that I must admit is spectacular, but he also got a power upgrade during the Year of the Villain event. Black Mask was given the ability to change his identity with the added upgrade of an identity changing mask, which is pretty powerful. Also, his suits have gotten admittedly a lot more stylish over the past few years. So for those who remember his classic look, Roman Sionis may have the same mask, but the rest of his look also seems to have received an upgrade. Number 6, the Freezes. That's right, not only does Freeze get a new redesign, but he also gets a huge change in the fact that he was joined by his family, becoming a little supervillain fam jam unit all their own. 2 separate units really. In the main continuity, Mr. Freeze was given a serum by Luthor that allowed him to make his long-lasting wish come true. He was able to revive, cure, and become reunited with his frozen love Nora, who also ended up joining him in a life of crime. Yay! However, while it all started out sweet, their reunion would quickly turn sour when Nora became resentful of Victor for making so many choices for her, and in her eyes, trying to control her. Victor blamed the serum for her change of heart, but I mean, who really knows? I feel like Nora's kinda got a bit of a point, even though I feel really bad for Victor in this scenario. In Batman issue 96, we are treated to an alternate Victor Freeze who commits crimes alongside his sons as a little criminal family unit. Super cute. Number 5, Man-Bat. While so many supervillains are getting power upgrades, additional allies, and more horrifying redesigns, Man-Bat is going the other way with it. Man-Bat is Kirk Langstrom, who ends up joining the Justice League Dark and gets a much more adorable character redesign as a result. He looks a lot less monstrous and a lot more humanoid and cute. Kinda geeky. It's great. He even wears a bow tie. Ah! This is likely a redesign meant to symbolize Man-Bat having tackled some of his personal demons and his move more towards a heroic role as opposed to a completely tortured soul and uncontrollable monster.
Number 5, Wither. Making his first appearance in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 3, Kevin Ford grew up thinking that he was cursed, or he was the most unlucky person ever, one or the two. See, his mutant power started manifesting, and then he noticed it first in his plants, and then he noticed it in his clothes, and then he noticed it in people. So what would happen is his plants would wither. They would wither and they would die. And then his clothes were starting to decay as well. So once his father figures out this mutation, he tries to calm him down, but coming into contact with him, obviously the inevitable happens. He sees the world in this lifeless or decaying way now. See, it's part of this mutation. He can disintegrate all forms of organic matter just by one touch. Whatever he touches withers, so now we get his name. It turns into dust within seconds, whatever it is. Now this seems boring, I guess. When you think of it in like a cinematic battle, it's not too exciting. But this guy can take out an entire elite squad just by touching them. I mean, realistically, just send him in always. No one's gonna expect it. All you have to do is get him to fist bump everybody and then bam, just like that, no more bad guys. Number 4. Nocturne. This next one, she comes from Earth 2182, where she's the daughter of Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch. Now, she's got her dad's looks, unfortunately. She's blue, furry, she's got 3 fingers and 3 toes. She's got a tail and yellow eyes and pointed ears. Now, sure, she looks like she can take out any bad guy, like she looks like an alien. So she possesses the powers of both of her parents. She can blast off energy bolts, she can climb walls, but what makes her even more powerful is that she has the ability to possess others for 12 hours, or 1 lunar cycle. But once that timer is up, the victim is just completely out of it for 24 hours, just comatose. This super offspring packs a super punch, that's for sure. Number 3, Tattoo. Christine Cord made her comic book debut in the new X-Men issue 126. She was a student of the Xavier Institute, and she's known as Tattoo, well, because her mutation allows her to display messages or designs on her skin, and she can phase through matter, which is also kind of fun. She's pretty awesome. I mean, when you first think of her, you may just think of the skin messages and be like, oh, whatever, maybe she's a spy, maybe she can be like, send help and then use her skin. Cool, that's good. But check this out. Tattoo actually phased her hand into Cyclops' head once and told him that if she becomes solid, he would not survive to see the end of it. How awesome is that? But she sadly lost her powers during the events of M-Day, but if you ever ran into Christine again, she would probably surprise you with her new ability. When she was released from jail, she joined the New Warriors and was given her own Stiltman armor, becoming Longstrike. So bam! 2 in 1. Talk about underrated. Number 2, Banshee. The Screaming Banshee. Okay, he made his first appearance in X-Men issue 28. Sean Cassidy was born as the heir to the castle and estate of Cassidy Keep, Ireland. Now, Professor Xavier asked him to join the X-Men at the same time as Thunderbird, and they both stayed as members of the new X-Men. Now, he went on to train the new generation of X-Men and Generation X, but he sadly lost his life during Deadly Genesis when he was trying to stop Blackbird from crashing when it was taken over. So when you think of an X-Men who screams so loud he can hurt people, it's impressive on its own, sure, but his screams are actually stronger than we really think. His screams can actually break through an inch of steel. And with these wings that Professor X developed for him, he's able to harness this power and use his screams as energy to help him fly. So he can do so much more with his voice as well. He can tighten the sound waves around himself to make a sonic shield, and he can influence your subconscious by changing the tones and vibrations of his voice. He can literally change your mind. How awesome is that? What do you mean you want a divorce? And finally, number 1, we have my favorite on the list, Bailey Hoskins. Okay, I have to talk about this poor kid. Okay, strongest X-Men you wouldn't expect? Yeah, that is for sure Bailey Hoskins. The only appearance of this kid is in the 2016 miniseries X-Men, Worst X-Man Ever, which is a pretty cruel name. He was a student at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, and his power is pretty spectacular. He can self-detonate, he can make himself explode, and you would never expect it just by looking at him. I mean, come on. He reminds me of Hogarth from the Iron Giant. He's such a cute kid. The thing is, he can only use this fantastic ability once. And his last issue in the comics was X-Men Worst X-Man Ever, issue 5.
Number 10, Hepzibah. Despite not being a mutant, Hepzibah became a member of the mainly mutant team of the X-Men after leaving the Starjammers. Initially, she was Corsair's lover, but after being forced to part ways with the Starjammers, she would end up on Earth and join the X-Men team. Hepzibah's abilities come from her own skill set and from her alien physiology. Hepzibah is a Mephistoid, the member of an anthropomorphic skunk-like alien race. After the loss of Corsair, Hepzibah would end up becoming closer to fellow X-Men member Warpath, and would even become his lover as well in the comics. It's fine, Corsair was dead at the time. While Hepzibah was a member of the X-Men and even was recruited for a time to be on X-Force, she eventually would return to the Starjammers once her lover, Corsair, also Cyclops' Havoc's and Vulcan's father, had returned from the dead. Number 9, Egg. While Fabio Medina might be more easily recognized now that he is part of the all-important mutant team known as the Five, responsible for resurrecting fallen mutants, when he was known by his former codename of Gold Balls, he would have been much less recognizable. Also, if you haven't been reading the comics for a while, you might not know that he's important now. That sounds so mean. He was important before, but he's really important now, you know what I mean? Fabio's power allows him to produce and shoot well, gold balls from his body, each one firing off with a poink sound. However, since his time as gold balls, it was more recently revealed during the dawn of X that the balls he was producing were in actuality unfertile eggs. With this revelation, he took up the name Egg and became part of the 5 most important mutants on the island nation of Krakoa. As with this newly understood power, he could create eggs which could then be made fertile and used to regrow and resurrect fallen mutants. So if you haven't heard of Egg or Gold Balls, he's a member you'll likely be more interested in knowing now. And before we move on to our next spot, just a quick reminder, if you love mutants as much as I love mutants, and I love them a lot, be sure you show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Beak. Beak's mutation ended up being slightly more unfortunate in comparison to some of the other more well-known core members of the X-Men team. Beak is Barnal Bowhusk, and his mutant powers are simply that he looks and shares similar attributes to a bird. His bones are hollow and light, meant to lend well to flying, and he has feathers which should also allow him or help him to fly, and yet he's not really a good flyer, which is kind of sad. In fact, initially Beak couldn't really fly at all when he first appeared. Now he can, but he still has to work really hard to do so, and even then he can really only fly for short distances. Other than that, Beak simply can see better than most at long range and is armed with talons and a beak, which he can obviously use to fight. But for the most part, Beak simply looks like a bird, and as such is usually more on the sidelines than in the middle of the action. He did for a while have a suit, however, that enhanced his abilities and also granted him additional strength and powers, more useful for physical fighting. Number 7. Morph. Because there are multiple morphs out there, not everyone is as familiar with Benjamin Deeds as the morph who appeared in the animated X-Men series from the 90s. This version of Morph, however, is a lot less cocky in comparison to that animated series version. Benjamin Deeds is a mutant who, like the animated version, can transform into anyone else. However, his powers are a little more unique than most shapeshifters. The more time he spends with someone, the more his appearance will grow to mimic theirs, not really becoming an exact duplicate of them, but more becoming his own version of that person, which also affects how that person sees him. Using his powers also makes the person he resembles both more eager to like and to trust Morph. And actually, initially I believe Morph didn't even like that codename. They were like, "You should be Morph," and he was like, "Meh, nah." Number 6. Thunderbird. While we haven't seen Neil Shara in a while, he was listed as a member of the X-Men in the Ten of Swords handbook, and while it's since been revealed that the X-Men were originally made defunct after Krakoa came to be during Dawn of X, they saw their return during the denouement of the Ten of Swords event in their own series, X-Men, which had been going on since Dawn of X in the comics, comically, despite the team no longer being technically recognized by the Quiet Council. So it's really weird. It's like we had an X-Men series, but like no one acknowledged that the X-Men team existed. Anyways, they're back now, sort of. Thunderbird could also appear again at some point as part of X Corporation, as Neil has also been a part of that team in the past. While he's not the most recognizable mutant to use the codename Thunderbird, Neil is still one of those mutants. His abilities allow him to convert ambient heat into solar plasma, turning his entire body into this type of plasma, which gives him a variety of abilities and powers, including emitting focused plasma beams and flight. Number 5. Leanne Harper. Leanne Harper has returned to us in the comics as one of Catwoman's group of street kids, if you can believe it. In DC Festival of Heroes, the Asian celebration out of 2021, Leanne makes a triumphant return to the comics. Here she sports dyed blue hair and calls herself Shoes. She doesn't remember her childhood or who her real parents are. She just remembers one evening where her mom, Cheshire, carried her to safety, and her mom's mask. I don't think she even really knows who Cheshire is, it seems, at least in this story. I don't even know if she knows that that was her mom. It's all a little unclear. In the story Masks, this single memory and the mask that she saw in it inspires her to become a hero herself. Attempting to remake the mask from her dreams, she takes up the mantle Cheshire Cat. The last time we knew Leanne, she was just a child. She was believed to have died at a young age, but it seems that she somehow survived and now suffers from amnesia in regards to her childhood. It'll be really cool to see how that develops and where Leanne shows up in the comics. I'm excited for it. Number 4, Brew. I love Brew, and I am so happy he's gotten such a boost to his power levels. Brew is one of the alien mutants to have joined the X-Men. He was found by them as a young abandoned brood. He was considered defective by his kind. Normally these kinds of brood that are born into the world are killed, but because populations were so low at the time, he was spared. What was wrong with Brew in the brood's eyes? What makes him a mutant? He's capable of kindness and compassion. Brew's mutant power as a brood is basically friendship, which admittedly on paper sounds kinda lame, even though I personally love it. But after a run-in with the brood who were chasing down their king egg, Brew ended up becoming their new ruler and king when he ate said egg. Meaning that now, yes, he is in charge of all of the brood in the cosmos, which is pretty impressive. So you might recognize him in terms of his overall look, but you might not recognize him in his new role as king when you see him in the comics. But get ready to, because that's happening. That happened. It's great. To read about when this development took place, check out issue 9 of the 2019 X-Men run. And if you want to sort of see the beginning of that, you might want to also check out issue 8. 8 and 9 basically. Number 3, Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman has been through quite a journey in the comics that started back in 2020. She was one of the heroes to go up against both the Batman Who Laughs and his master Perpetua. His sort of master. And Wonder Woman got Perpetua's powers not only once but twice during the Dark Knight's death metal event. Although the first time around she failed in being able to confidently use them to save everyone, the second time around she made sure to intercept those powers before they could move into the Batman Who Laughs, who was currently in an alternate Batman Dr. Manhattan body and known as the Darkest Knight. The second time around, Wonder Woman managed to use these powers to defeat the villains and rebuild the universe, winning the day for our heroes and giving us a glimpse into the future to come in Future State. Wonder Woman now has basically become one with the cosmos, and for her good deeds was granted a nice long cosmic nap by the hands. How nice. We could all use a long cosmic nap, could we not? I know I could. I could definitely use that. Take me to space and let me sleep along the stars. That'd be great. Number 2, Captain Kate. Call me Kate is the new tagline for Kitty Pryde as she reclaims the mutant team name Marauders and sets sail as their leader in the group book Marauders, which primarily centers around Kate, Emma Frost, and Storm. Seriously, I love this book. It is so good. Becoming a captain and the new Red Queen of the Hellfire Trading Company inspired Kate to take up an entirely new look, which means that you might not recognize her if you were just picking up a random issue of Marauders or gazing at one of its covers. Personally, this is a look that I think is worthy of all of the cosplays. Everyone must become Captain Kate now. Number 1, Roy Harper. You might not recognize Speedy if you see him anywhere recently in the comics, especially as the last time we saw him in the comics, he was killed by Wally West in Heroes in Crisis. So he was looking pretty dead. And he remained kinda dead even when Batman as a Black Lantern revived him and many others during the events of Dark Knight's death metal. Green Arrow's companion is now becoming more cosmic than ever as he becomes more associated with the Green Lantern's world, becoming himself a Black Lantern. How or why did this happen? Well, it's a bit of a mystery. Roy was being attacked by new villain Extract, who claimed that Roy didn't belong in this world. During this attack he was knocked out, and when Roy came to, he found himself the Black Lantern ring in a Black Lantern uniform, learning that alternate energy construct versions of himself were the ones who had come to his rescue and saved him. And then he kind of also learned sort of why he was a Black Lantern, sort of. Has to do with Darkseid. You should check it out. It's a cool thing. It's a cool thing that's happening, and I'm interested to see where it goes. I think it's gonna lead us to Leanne too. Yes, father and daughter reunited. Number 10, Spider-Woman. Jessica Drew has returned to her more classic look now in the comics, with a few upgrades though, but prior to that she was rocking an entirely new look in the beginning of the current Spider-Woman run. Love it or hate it, I personally loved it, her new inverted black, red, and yellow suit has been retired for now. But let's talk a little bit about the look and where it all came from, yeah? Spider-Woman ended up reaching out to get a new suit made when she decided to take on some bodyguard work to make some cash. And she thought to herself, hey, I can't wear like my regular suit, I'm gonna need a new suit for that. Because being a hero is great and all, but it doesn't really pay, and Jess does have bills to pay and baby Jerry to look after. Although she does have Roger's help, I think children are in most cases a job for 2 salaries in this economy, like minimum. Ronnie of Big Ronnie's Custom Battle Spandex made this new suit custom for Jessica, but under the instruction of someone who wanted to also monitor Jess's vitals. This comic is so good, I will not spoil that reveal for you if you want to go and read it. All I'll say is that you should give this new look and new comic a chance and check it out. And don't worry, Jess's classic look does return in issue 11. Number 9. Gilgamesh. I love Gilgamesh's new design actually. Gilgamesh is not an Eternal who has made a ton of appearances, but he is back in the newest series and sporting a new armored look in comparison to what we knew him to look like originally. This new design for the character kind of reminds me of Black Bolt if he were a luchador, but I mean that in the best way possible if that makes any sense. Gilgamesh here looks intensely intimidating in comparison to when we were first introduced to him. His armor was still cool then, made I believe by Sprite in issue 13 of the 1976 Eternal series, but in comparison to the modern day, it's kinda dated. Back then he rocked a full bodysuit with purple or hot pink lining depending on what color you see when you look at that, and here in the present day even the patterning for the lines of his suit is an improvement. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about more updated looks, roles, power sets, all of those cool things, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel has currently been going from cosmic to mystic in her own series as she seeks to defend herself against her one greatest weakness: magic. In order to do so, she returned to her friend and former one-night stand, Doctor Strange, for help, but when he and his colleagues all turned her away, Carol was forced to look elsewhere. Her new costume kind of alludes to this more magical time in her life and features a pretty cool cape, I gotta say. I do dig it. It definitely seems to take some inspiration from the whole Sorcerer Supreme look. Over the course of her current series, Carol has actually had more than a few new looks, including a Kree-inspired suit which she also sported during Empire, when she became a Kree accuser, and the red and black suit the Vox Supreme bonded to her, also making her hunt down the Avengers. Her newest magical inspired suit is introduced in issue 28 of the current Captain Marvel run for those interested in checking it out. Number 7. Hippolyta. Hippolyta is now filling in for her daughter on the new Justice League team, leaving the ruling of Themyscira to Nubia, who has taken up her place as ruler. And with this shift we also have gotten a completely new redesign for Hippolyta. To be honest, I almost didn't recognize her at first myself when I first saw this redesign. She's given up her regal clothes for a white and gold bodysuit, although admittedly she is still keeping a version of her crown while out on the battlefield with the current Justice League. Her tiara here comes in the shape of an eagle, which also makes it look similar to Wonder Woman's W shape, which I love. Hippolyta also wears a royal sash, which extends up to a sort of one-shouldered cape number. These pieces help to allude to Hippolyta's history and royalty while also updating her outfit to more fit in with her new role as one of Earth's greatest heroes. Of course, that is just, I assume, the look we are building to. When Hippolyta first shows up in the new Justice League run, she is sporting a much more regal looking costume, which is purple and gold, which I actually really love that costume. I know we're probably going to this white gold thing, but I really like this purple costume. Number 6. Aquaman. Aquaman's new look just kinda seems to be a nod to Jason Momoa's portrayal and the design for that character. Mainly his newest costume features green pants, with a belt, with a symbol on it, and well, I guess tattoos? The other thing you might notice if you are reading the Justice League and checking out Aquaman in there lately is that he's kind of gone back to being a weaker character who's a bit of a joke. Overall, I'm not too sure how I feel about this one. I guess it all boils down with this redesign as to how much you are into Jason Momoa's version and whether or not you like your Aquaman to be more powerful or less powerful. Someone throw some water on that Aquaman. He's dying. Number 5. Cypher. You know about Cypher, but do you know about Cypher? With an I, not with a Y. Just to be clear. Cypher is Elisa Tager and has powers similar to mutant Kitty Pryde. That is, she can phase, and even float or fly while in her phased state. She was part of the Gene School for Higher Learning and was initially discovered by mutant Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Zorn. Cypher also can turn herself invisible both visually and psychically. Well, almost completely invisible psychically. Almost. Immensely powerful telepaths such as Jean Grey have still been shown as being able to sense her. Although Cypher has only only made a few appearances here and there in the comics, she still managed to make her way onto the Young X-Men team and has even reappeared on Krakoa. Number 4. Ink. Ink is another member of the X-Men who technically isn't a mutant. It was believed initially that his mutant ability was to gain powers from his tattoos. However, it was later revealed that it was Eric Gitter, aka Ink's tattoo artist, who was the mutant and who basically imbued Eric with these powers using his own mutant ability. Ink's tattoo artist was Leon Nunez, a mutant with no codename really, simply being known by his name or known as the tattoo artist. Ink would be recruited as one of the Young X-Men, initially believing he was working for Cyclops, but later learning he was in fact working for a disguised Donald Pierce. Ink fought alongside his fellow X-Men, but would leave the team for a time later on after discovering that he wasn't truly a mutant, when he found out where his powers really came from. When his fellow teammates needed his help, however, he would return armed with more tattoos from his artist. The Ten of Swords handbook listed him as an active member of the X-Men, so, you know. He's there, he could be back again, I don't know. I feel like I haven't seen Ink in a while, but he's out there. Number 3. Slipstream. On my previous list I talked about the mutant known as Lifeguard, but now it's time to focus on her brother, who is also a mutant, don't you know, Davis Cameron, aka Slipstream. While his sister Heather worked as an actual lifeguard in Australia, Davis himself was a surfer. His powers weren't activated until later in his life and were actually awoken by Sage after his sister went missing, and it was revealed his latent mutant abilities could be used to help find and then rescue her. Slipstream's abilities allow him to create quantum portals, which can transport him and any passengers he takes along with him across great distances. However, it should be noted it requires a lot of concentration for him to bring others along with him. He can also track previous teleportations, allowing him to use these warp wave abilities to find his way to the destination and location of teleporters that he's tracking. Which I think is a pretty useful ability, tracking teleporters, because they're tricky. Number 2. Spider-Girl. Well, not naturally born, but kinda made in a lab, Spider-Girl made a single appearance in Avenging Spider-Man issue 16. She had similar powers to Spider-Man, but was made of a combination of spider and mutant DNA by the Jackal, using materials found in Mr. Sinister's lab. Wow, the Jackal in Mr. Sinister's lab just sounds like such a dangerous thing. As such, she also had the additional powers to shapeshift into a giant spider with 5 human eyes. While in this shape, she also had the power to spit purple mucus and even fire optic blasts from her eyes. Makes you think there might be some Summers DNA mixed in there, which honestly, if we're talking about Mr. Sinister's lab, I wouldn't be surprised. She ended up rampaging across the city of New York after the Jackal released her as part of a test. Fortunately, she was apprehended by Superior Spider-Man and the X-Men, who explained that she seemed to be a mutant and ended up taking her in after defeating her. We never really heard anything about her after that. Spider-Girl was created by Christopher Yost and Paco Medina. Who knows, maybe we'll see her again, I don't know. Number 1. Forget-Me-Not. Despite the fact that Forget-Me-Not is someone you definitely forget, you may have heard us talk about him on the channel before, because his powers are just so interesting. But for those who haven't heard of him or have simply forgotten him, let's give you a little refresher course. Forget-Me-Not is an X-Men member whose mutant power is that no one can ever remember him. This makes it easier for him to basically infiltrate places, but it makes it harder for him to ever connect with anyone, make a friend, or even have his teammates remember that he's actually on the team. This is why Forget-Me-Not is also usually left off of the official rosters for the team, and why you might never really see his name mentioned there, ever. Forget-Me-Not's psychic powers that enable him to go unnoticed and remain forgotten were actually so strong that even Professor Xavier struggled to remember him, and as it was revealed in X-Men Legacy issue 300, had to place within his mind a psychic hourly reminder just so he wouldn't forget permanently about Forget-Me-Not's existence. If you're wondering what happened to Forget-Me-Not in the end, he was forgotten. So, yeah. Number 10. Deadpool. Deadpool has gone through phases where he was fully cured of his power set and even pretty once more in the comics, like back during Daniel Way's Deadpool run, looking completely normal but without his healing factor. But the most startling shift when it comes to Deadpool's appearance has to be between his on-screen adaptations. That's right, we're talking about the comparison between Deadpool's cinematic debut in the X-Men Origins Wolverine film and his own self-titled film franchise. Although oddly enough, both both roles feature him played by Ryan Reynolds. The two adaptations could not be more different. Thankfully in Deadpool 2, Wade manages to fix Cable's temporal dial. Using this device to time travel, Wade is not only able to save Vanessa, who initially died at the beginning of that film, but is also able to clean up the timelines by killing the previous version of himself, who is also known as Weapon 11. It should also be noted that in X-Men Origins Wolverine, Deadpool appeared fully as a villain, as opposed to the lovable mess of an anti-hero we've come to know him as within his own film franchise. Number 9. Raquel. Raquel. I never know how to say this name, but I'm pretty sure it's like Raquel. How do you say Skrull names? That's the question. For some reason, probably because she had been gone so long, Raquel, aka the Skrull Empress, aka Emperor Doric VIII / Hulkling / Teddy Altman's grandmother, was completely unrecognized when she returned. Raquel was revealed to be alive and well, and also sleuthing it up as she impersonated Tynalt the Pursuer, an elite member of the Kree forces. And apparently Raquel had been impersonating Tynalt so long she had in essence created her persona and basically was her. Raquel had actually been plotting and planning in secret, putting in place all the pieces to bring together the Kree and Skrull Empire, uniting them in an alliance in order to ensure her grandson was the one to rule over the now allied empire, as we saw in Empire. That's the name of the event, so not to be redundant. It was an empire, but it's spelled empire with a Y because it's a whole other thing. And yet when she was revealed in that event to be the one revealed as the Skrull pretending to be Tynalt, many Marvel fans actually needed to crack open their comic history books and review just who exactly she was, with many people mistaking her for Veranki, the Skrull Queen. But yes, this is Raquel. She was believed to have died when the Skrull homeworld perished along with her daughter Princess Nell, as their world was devoured by Galactus. She made her first appearance in the Fantastic Four original series in issue 206 and was believed to have perished in issue 257. But she didn't, she was still alive, and then she came back years later and everyone went, who is that? What? Veranki? What? Not Veranki, two different people. Number 8. Kraven the Hunter. You might think you recognize Kraven, but do you really? After all, the current Kraven that you've seen turning up in the current Beyond storyline of the Amazing Spider-Man series is actually none other than Kraven's last son. Well, his last clone son, anyway. This clone of Kraven was given the name of Last Son after he hunted down all his other brothers, his other clone brothers, who had also been trained by Sergei Kravenov, the Kraven himself. As such, this clone of Kraven was named his true heir, and since then has also taken up the mantle of Kraven the Hunter. So while he may look like Kraven, albeit a younger version of him, this Kraven the Hunter is not actually the original. So I guess this is a character that you would recognize, but in so doing you'd be wrong, which means I guess you didn't really recognize him then, did you? This version of Kraven made his first appearance in the current run of The Amazing Spider-Man, which started in 2018, first appearing back in issue 16 as the Last Son. Number 7. Xemnu. Xemnu made his first appearance in Journey into Mystery in issue number 62. We learned that Xemnu was actually a prisoner and a criminal who was retrieved and accidentally revived by a human and electrician named Joe Harper. Xemnu would go on to become known as Xemnu the Living Hulk, and would also prove to be a powerful cosmic, psionic, and all-around bizarre enemy to the Hulk and the Hulk family in time. Initially, he clashed with the original superhero powerhouse team known as the Defenders. Xemnu in his first appearance has brownish or reddish fur, but currently has reappeared in the comics with white fur, making him look kind of like a space yeti. You may not recognize him because you forgot him, or because he's just so weird, or it could be just because of this change when it comes to, you know, his overall fur color. But yeah, he's got different, I guess he dyed his fur? I don't know. What happened there? Number 6. Norman Osborn. Well, you might currently recognize Norman Osborn in terms of his appearance. When it comes to his actions and his alignment, you might not. And in modern comics, Norman has also gone through a couple dramatic redesigns and makeovers in recent history. At one point, Norman gets plastic surgery to completely change his facial appearance, reinventing himself as Mason Banks and becoming the head of Alchemax. There's even an unmasked point where we were all kind of like, wait, who's that? And then he's like, I changed my face, but it's me, Norman Osborn, aka also Mason Banks. He also has been the head of Hammer and his own Dark Avengers, and for a time posed as their version of Iron Man, tarnishing the mantle of Iron Patriot, and more recently, a depowered Norman bonded with the Carnage symbiote, allowing himself to use the Goblin Serum once more, but ultimately being driven insane by that whole experience and believing himself to actually be prime Carnage host and serial killer Cletus Cassidy. Now sane again, however, and seemingly purified by the Sin Eater, currently in the comics, Norman is on a path of redemption, having gained a new lease on life and being cured of his usual villainous intentions. Or so it would seem. I never trust Norman, but that's what's up currently. Number 5. Galactus. One villain who recently got a very mummy-inspired looking makeover was Galactus during his time in Thor's latest series as written by Donny Cates. Here in the first arc of the 2020 Thor series, referred to as Volume 6 overall of Thor, Thor takes on the immensely powerful cosmic entity known as the Black Winter. Because the Black Winter is so powerful, Thor is forced to team up with Galactus to defeat it. Unfortunately, he also learns that Galactus is actually kind of a herald for the Black Winter. FYI, that is just how powerful of a force the Black Winter is. He has Galactus as a herald. After devouring 5 planets to bolster his own power, Galactus has this power stripped from him by Thor upon this revelation. Thor leaves Galactus drained of the power cosmic, wrinkled, and de-armored, even taking Galactus's helmet as a trophy, using it as the entrance to his throne room. So while you might have recognized him previously, Galactus then got super upgraded and now is very mummified and also very dead. Oof. Number 4. Onslaught. Onslaught initially was a villain with a mysterious background. Despite the fact the powerful villain looked a ton like Magneto and seemed to pack a psionic powerhouse of abilities that echoed an evil Professor X, the character's true identity as really both of those mutants wouldn't be confirmed till after his initial appearance. When Onslaught appeared again, it was in a similar vein, and while the symbol of Onslaught might be similar, this time around when it came to the character's identity, they were even less recognizable, as it was explained that basically all the mutants of Krakoa were, in a way, Onslaught, and that Onslaught was able to exist through their constant resurrections. So while you might recognize the look of Onslaught when they returned, their true identity was even more of a mystery than the first time around. And their final form that we saw during X-Men The Onslaught Revelation was pretty wild as well, getting a bit of an update to match even the current character designs of what an amalgamated Charles and Eric would look like currently. I like that that version of Onslaught has like the black suit to now the tight black suit that Charles wears. It's a look. Number 3. One Below All. I think one of the biggest revelations of modern comics was learning that even a being as good as the One Above All, who is basically considered to be like Marvel God, has a dark side. The One Below All ended up being a major villain in the Immortal Hulk series, and we'd later learn that their power actually came from one of the most divine and good beings in the Marvel universe, the One Above All. The One Below All is like the Hulk for the One Above All. In other words, their darker and much more destructive other half. So while you might know the One Above All and you might know the One Below All, I bet you'd be surprised to learn that they were actually directly connected to one another. They can't exist without the other, especially given how different in appearance and alignment they both are. But this revelation was also super powerful and fitting for a series that was really all about forgiving and reconciling the darker side of the Hulk, the Hulks, and ultimately of humanity and our own individual selves. After all, we all have like a little bit of a Hulk side to us. Number 2. Killmonger. If you go on far enough back, Eric Killmonger easily becomes one of Marvel's villains you would not soon recognize. And that goes both ways. Whether we're talking about more recent fans looking back in comic history to his first appearance in Jungle Action, volume number 2, or whether we're talking about his initial fans looking at his modern MCU adaptation and comic redesign, which obviously takes inspiration from the MCU version of Eric. Killmonger made his first appearance in the second volume of Jungle Action from the 1970s in issue number 6, and even from that front cover, he just looks like really different. Here, Eric does not sport any self-created bodily scars marking his kills, but instead comes with a lot of spiky accessories, including what appears to be a spike belt, which he uses as a weapon to fight against his foe and his rival, Black Panther. All the spikes. Now he's got scars, but back then he had spikes. Number 1, the leader. I doubt after all this time if the leader even really recognizes himself, considering what he looks like now. Following the events of Immortal Hulk, the leader is left no longer a supervillain, but just a guy. Throughout the course of the series, we saw the leader only grow more evil and more powerful, it seemed. He was eventually basically influenced or possessed by the one below all, the most powerful of all Hulk-related baddies, and possibly the baddest of the bad just in general. However, after the two beings were separated from one another, Stearns was left as just a man, returned to normal. The Hulk decided to forgive the leader, and he returned back to the Earth with all the other Hulks and Bruce Banner. It's been a long time, but Sam Stearns is no longer the leader, at least not currently in the comics. I mean, he could return to being the leader at some point. Instead, Samuel Stearns is just Samuel Stearns. Number 10, Super Skrull. Kl'rt might be recognizable when it comes to his character design, which admittedly has not changed that much over the years, but when it comes to his alignment, you might be somewhat surprised to learn where he is now, from where he started. Super Skrull Kl'rt made his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 18. Once again, the Skrulls attempted to invade Earth and planned on defeating the FF, this time with their secret weapon, the Super Skrull, who seemed to possess all of the Fantastic Four's powers. Unfortunately, Mr. Fantastic and the team realized that these powers were likely not Super Skrull's own, and suspected in fact that they were delivered to him from the Skrull homeworld. They used a device to jam the signal that was giving Kl'rt his powers, defeating him. Currently in the comics, Kl'rt serves Emperor Hulkling, and was for a time one of his trusted advisors. Kl'rt, however, was also the one who killed Hulkling's foster mother. Recently in Empire Aftermath, Kl'rt felt so awful about his past that he actually offered his life to the Emperor. Hulkling refused to accept it though, instead preferring to make Kl'rt work in the area of diplomacy so that he might make amends for all the lives that he had taken in times of war. He was like, no. Instead, you gotta save lives, and hopefully that'll make up for it. You can't just die on me, Kl'rt. Number 9, Hell's Bells. Hell's Bells was a group of villains who were all female mutants. The team was originally assembled by Cyber, who trained all of its members and consisted of Shrew, Briquette, Flame, Tremolo, and Vague. When Shrew betrayed them by testifying against them in order to get immunity for herself, the Hell's Bells banded together in an attempt to get revenge on her for betraying them. Eventually, they would be successfully taken into custody by X-Factor. Following the events of M-Day and Decimation, all team members save Briquette found themselves completely depowered. They still have operated as criminals in the comics, appearing in the Children of Adam series most recently, but they were a lot less scary because they had to rely on equipment and gadgets in place of, their own powers. Even without their powers, the team mainly stuck together though, minus Briquette and obviously Shrew. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want even more lists about Marvel villains you might not recognize or something in that realm, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Silver Samurai. While Silver Samurai looks much the same in the comics as he always has, not every iteration of him has been so recognizable. We've seen him turn up here and there on Krakoa recently. He seems to enjoy watching and participating in the friendly single combat matches in the Quarry, and in modern comics, he's recognizable. But how about in modern film? Well, Silver Samurai might not be a main character in Fox's mutant universe, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. He actually made an appearance in the 2013 film The Wolverine. But although here he also seemingly looked the same, when it came to his armor at least, he couldn't be further from his comic book counterpart in actuality. That's because Silver Samurai here was an adamantium robot whom Wolverine had to battle against. Yeah, they made Kennyukio Harada robot armor. He was at least piloted by Ikiro Yoshida, who is obviously that film's version of Ken's own father in the comics. So, at least there was a little bit of a thing, but still, he wasn't even a person. He was just robot armor. Like, rude. Ken is a whole person, okay? It's not just armor. Number 7, Forearm. Forearm is Michael McCain. Originally, Michael was part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front. He was one of the founding members, but would end up defeated by those that fought against him. Despite generally being on the side of the villains, Forearm was also welcomed onto the mutant island nation of Krakoa, where he could have a fresh start for himself. He accepted the offer and would end up joining Sword and being seen as a member of Magic's Dark Riders, who I think should get their own book. However, on Krakoa, he looks a bit different from his initial appearance, where he decidedly was showing a lot more forearm and had much less shirt. Forearm's mutant power is that he has 4 arms. Get it? Get it? His 4 arms. And now he wears shirts. Good for you, Forearm. Good for you. Although you can also not wear a shirt. You can not wear a shirt if you don't want to wear a shirt. Like, I'm not gonna pressure anyone to wear shirts if they don't want to, or vice versa. I'm not gonna pressure anyone to like not wear a shirt if they're like, I like my shirt, let me keep my shirt. But I do like his new design as well. His new outfit is pretty cool. Number 6, Thanos. Thanos might look very similar to his initial appearance in the comics, and also looks quite similar on the big screen, but he's seen a pretty big change when it comes to what he's up to recently. In the comics, that is. In the MCU, he's mainly dead and gone, but there is a chance perhaps that he could return. Who knows? Not only have we now met Star Fox or Eros in the MCU, but in the comics, Thanos has become the new Prime Eternal, and as such, their new leader. That's right, this guy just went from being the baddest supervillain around to leader of a superhero team. Although we'll have to see where the Eternals' alignment is in the comics following the events of Avengers vs. X-Men vs. Eternals War, because that's probably gonna be crazy. Also, I don't even know what the Eternals is really doing in that mix, but I'm here for it. I'm here to check that out. Number 5, Blindfold. Blindfold is Ruth Aldine and is a possible descendant of Destiny. She was born without eyes entirely. Her mutant powers allow her to manipulate astral energy, tap into the astral plane, and grant her specific telepathic abilities, including precognition and clairvoyance. She also has the ability to manipulate chaos factors and alter events in order to achieve a desired result, and maintains a reality warp resistance. Pretty useful. She also has some telekinetic abilities as well. Much of her power was lost to her, and she was in rough shape when she was admitted to the Xavier Institute. She had lost half her power and had her mind shattered by her brother. Blindfold had a really rough home life, and her brother Luca ended up coming home one day filled with hate for his sister and prepared to kill her with a chainsaw. When her mother stepped in to defend her, her mother was instead murdered by Luca, who blamed young Ruth's freakishness for his own actions. Luca ended up getting the death penalty for this crime, but when he died, it seemed as though his own mutant abilities manifested, causing him to shift into an astral or ghost-like form and attack Ruth. Blindfold has a close connection to Legion and would later end up in a relationship with the son of Charles Xavier. Yay! I don't know why I'm celebrating that, but I just think it's kind of a cute romance, I guess. Number 4, Triage. Triage was one of the mutants to appear after the dispersion of the Phoenix Force. Christopher Muse discovered his powers when a friend of his fell and hit her head while they were out dancing. It seemed as though she was dead until Christopher's touch seemed to heal and revive her, bringing her back to life. Eventually, he was apprehended by the police because of his miraculous healing ability, but would later be freed and recruited by the X-Men. He was one of the mutants who was captured and later killed by one using the X-gene cure after he refused to use his healing powers to help them. Triage seems to have had eternal youth and immortality as a result of his powers, in addition to being able to heal others and even reanimate the dead. Fortunately, since his death, he is one of the mutants that we have seen return by the Five on Krakoa, with him being spotted in the comics at Krakoan hotspot, the Green Lagoon. Number 3, Darkwind. X-Men teammates really do come in all shapes and sizes. Coming to us from Asgard, we have Dani Moonstar's mighty steed, Brightwind. Remember when Dani joined the Valkyrie after she lost her powers following M-Day? Yeah, it was during that time that she met and bonded with Brightwind. After leaving Asgard and returning to Earth, Brightwind came with her, but instead became known as Darkwind on Earth. So that's why I said Darkwind at the beginning of this point. By extension, he became a member of the X-Men and New Mutants along with Dani. Cute. Number 2, Ariel. Ariel is an alien from the planet known as the Coconut Grove. Her mutant power is persuasion, but due to her alien physiology, she can also teleport. Ariel herself is also related to another Ariel who visited Earth and inspired the character of the same name from William Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. There's a lot of Tempest references in my list today. Ariel, the one we're focusing on with this point, not her ancestor, also ended up on Earth after being sent there on a mission to collect collect samples from the mutants of Earth for her people to study. They themselves had reached an evolutionary standstill as such, and were curious about the Earth mutants and their evolutionary process. It was during her time on Earth that she would meet up with and join the Fallen Angels, and later on in San Francisco would end up meeting the X-Men team and joining them for a time. Number 1. Sunpyre. You know Sunfire, but do you know Sunpyre? Sunpyre was Shiro Yoshida's younger sister, Leu. She also had powers and an attitude similar to her brothers, and first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 392 in 2001. For those unfamiliar with Sunfire's or Sunpyre's abilities, both siblings possess the mutant ability of solar flare, which allows them to absorb solar radiation and convert it into superheated plasma. Using this ability, they could both cover their body in flame as they became like a flying, human-shaped sun. Sunpyre can use her power to emit plasma blasts and give off intense solar heat. Leu is one of the mutants who answered a psychic call to help defeat Magneto and save Professor X. After helping out the X-Men in that adventure, she'd later appear again as a member of the X-Corps. It is believed she died in action when the other members of X-Corps turned on her because Mastermind, Martinique Wingard, working in league with Mystique, was controlling them. Number 10. Binary. Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel ended up in a fight with Rogue that left her zapped of her powers and her memories. During the tussle, Carol was thrown from the Golden Gate Bridge, but fortunately Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, showed up to save the day. Unfortunately, when Carol came to, it was apparent that her memories had been wiped. Spider-Woman reached out to the X-Men for help, and for a time, Carol Danvers became part of that team. Professor X was able to help restore Carol's memories, but her emotional attachments to those memories would remain lost. It was during her time adventuring with the X-Men that she would become binary after a space adventure with the team saw her cross paths with the Brood, who exposed her to an evolutionary ray that tapped into her latent potential. True story. Number 9. Longshot. Longshot is a paradoxal hero. He ended up joining the X-Men after being sent to Earth by Mojo so that he would forget all that had passed before that, like the part where he almost defeated Mojo. Without his memories, Longshot showed up in the X-Men's danger room and would end up befriending them and serving as an ally and a teammate. He is the father of Shatterstar, who he had with X-Men member Dazzler, but was also made from Shatterstar's DNA, creating a paradox and a strange time loop when it comes to his origins and his creation. Longshot got his name during his time on Earth, which was given to him because of his fighting style. Longshot always taking the long shot, the less likely, more desperate path of success in fights. Longshot, however, can do this as while not a mutant but being engineered from the DNA of one. He possesses probability altering powers which grant him a bit of luck. He also has enhanced speed, strength, agility, and endurance, which he often uses to fight with using throwing knives. Longshot is also known for his super handsome powers that cause many people he meets to instantly fall for him. And before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder, if you love X-Men truly as much as I love X-Men, then be sure to show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out here at the channel, so thank you if you already did that. Number 8. Surge. Surge grew up homeless on the streets of New York after running away from her home when her powers first manifested. Far away apparently, as she was born initially in Tokyo, and her parents still live there. Her powers cause her to absorb electricity from all nearby sources at all times, without the ability to stop, even zapping electricity out of the air. She can then discharge this energy through blasts or by using it to give herself bursts of super speed. Noriko Ishida's powers are hard for her to control and are considered volatile, which is why Beast created gauntlets for her that helped her to control them when she was later welcomed into the Xavier Institute, after initially being turned away. Number 7. Danger. Who could forget one of the most important members of the X-Men? The Danger Room. The Danger Room was a room used to help train the various members of the X-Men team, but was later revealed to be mutated technology which had evolved to become a sentient AI. So yeah, an AI mutant. Danger revealed their intelligence to Xavier when, after an upgrade and relocation facilitated by Mutant Forge, they asked, "Where am I?" Charles chose to ignore this and hide the room's sentience from the X-Men so that he could continue to use it to train his team. Pretty selfish. Pretty selfish, Professor. Danger is extremely powerful, and parallels between her and Ultron are often drawn on in the comics when it comes to all the destruction that she could be capable of. She possesses superhuman strength, stamina, and durability, as well as enhanced reflexes and agility. She can command and control other technology and use her own mass to recreate other materials and/or rooms. She can also create other technology and even technological bodies if she happens to have mechanical devices, scrap, or equipment to work with. Number 6. Caliban. Caliban is believed to have gotten his name from that of the character from William Shakespeare's Tempest, often referred to as having a monstrous appearance. Poor Caliban, and also poor Caliban. Caliban is one of the members of the Morlocks, but he would later on join the X-Force and even go on to team up with the X-Men later on, despite him and the Morlocks being their frequent enemies in the past. Caliban's mutant powers increase the reaction of his fight or flight response, allowing him to manifest super strength as well as a sort of absorption and then later emission of fear. Basically, if you're feeling afraid in the moment, he can kind of like take that in and then put it back at you, or if he's feeling afraid. It's pretty useful. You're gonna be afraid, you know what I mean? These powers only appear when in this mode, however, when Caliban experiences that increase in adrenaline. He is also able to sense the presence of mutants within a nearby radius, and that's a mutant power that he has even when he's not in that fight or flight mode. Number 5. Rhino. Rhino was given a completely new look for his appearance in the second Amazing Spider-Man film. Honestly, Rhino is a hard villain to do in live action, I feel like, so I'm not surprised with the direction that they went with, but also what a weird direction to go in for that character, considering what they're actually supposed to be like in the comics. In the comics, Rhino is Alexei Sistovich, who is genetically altered and then bonded to a suit of armor that increases his strength and durability. Basically, he's given like a mechanical rhino skin, but like the skin. The armor was modeled after a rhinoceros, as they are known in nature for being relentless when it comes to their assault and extremely hard to defeat due to their tough hide. Rhino, however, has never been known for being very smart, which makes him fairly easy to defeat usually, which seems to be the same idea when it came to his cinematic counterpart. However, the whole design for this character was definitely different than the comic book counterpart, whose armor was much less mech-like or robotic and is more like just the tough hide of a rhino. Really, he kind of just looks like a guy in a rhino suit in the comics. Also, Alexei is just super jacked in the comics, and his cinematic counterpart didn't seem so jacked. He was just like a guy in a suit. Of course, Alexei does get a lot of his jackedness as well from his whole rhino thing, but he also, I think, was jacked still to begin with, I'm pretty sure. He's just more jacked. Number 4, Legion. Legion has a new look in X-Men Onslaught Revelation. This one-shot is kind of like the bookend for the Way of X limited series if you were checking that out, which I personally haven't read all of, but I will say the parts of it that I have read have been strictly excellent, so I would recommend Way of X to anyone that's interested. If you like the idea of pondering the why in life and beliefs, and you enjoy philosophical prose, this is really a great series for you. In Onslaught Revelation, Nightcrawler, Legion, Pixie, and Dust come together to try and defeat the resurrected Onslaught, who has been slowly returning with each resurrection, residing as pieces in the minds of all mutants. In order to help in the fight against Onslaught, Legion makes his mind a safe space for all mutants to come through, in essence also fully connecting with Krakoa and kind of becoming a sort of hive mind if necessary. As such, he gets a redesign, though he still gets to keep the wild shape of his hair that we've all come to recognize so well, and that I've really come to love. Legion, moving forward after the defeat of Onslaught, will also keep this look as he becomes the newly created religion's church. That's right, Legion is the church. He's the building. In essence, people can come into his mind to worship, find community, and seek sanctuary. It's like a nice safe space for people to come and just like be and feel good. It's awesome. I love that Legion is the church. I just think that's great. Number 3, Donald Blake. Donald Blake ended up becoming a villain recently in the comics, which is a pretty big change for a guy who was once also the mighty hero Thor. Donald Blake used to be Thor's human form, but in reality was kind of his own person, or he kind of ended up becoming his own person. He was created by Odin to be a human host for Thor, but after Thor died at the hands of the serpent, Blake became separated from Thor and became his own separate entity. Eventually, he would end up going to the Enchantress for help, only for her to use him to make her own villainous creature referred to as the Keep. Basically, she killed Donald Blake and then used his blood to make the Keep, and we haven't seen the Keep in a while, but I'm sure he's out there somewhere. After Amora and the Keep were defeated by Thor, Blake was laid to rest, living on as a disembodied head in a dream world that was crafted for him. Well, living on as a person in the dream world, but he was just a disembodied head. But he was asleep, so he was dreaming. Eventually, though, Blake came to realize that this world wasn't real, and awoke from his dream, seeking revenge on all Thors across the multiverse for what had happened to him. And don't worry, he wasn't just a head then. He had a body then. He would end up being defeated by 616 Thor in the end, and then made into the God of Lies, as per Thor's brother Loki's suggestion. Thor was like, what do we do with this guy? We shouldn't kill this guy. He's Donald Blake. Loki's like, nah, let's make him the God of Lies. Seems to fit considering everything Donald Blake has been through. Number 2, Taskmaster. Taskmaster is Anthony Masters and is known for being an unstoppable foe. He can master pretty much any skill he can observe. Some would say he's a taskmaster, which makes him a deadly opponent. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we were also introduced to Taskmaster, but the character was changed somewhat for the film in which they were introduced, Black Widow. Instead, Antonia Dreykov, the daughter of General Dreykov, the man behind the Red Room, was Taskmaster. When Black Widow left the Red Room and became an Avenger, she believed she had killed Dreykov, sadly also having to kill his daughter, who basically led them to their target. She was a casualty of the explosion, intended to kill Dreykov himself. Instead, Antonia was actually badly injured and ended up surviving, but her face was permanently scarred. She then became Dreykov's weapon, having studied the moves of the Avengers and having their fighting styles basically uploaded into her brain, allowing her to mimic all their various moves and making her a hard opponent for Black Widow to defeat. Quite different from the comic book version, but still really cool and badass as an alternate version of the character, I think. Number 1, Cyber. Cyber has come a long way when it comes to his look in the comics. Granted, Cyber has also come back a lot of times, so I guess it kind of makes sense that he would look different. He made his first appearance in Marvel Comics Presents in issue 85 in the 90s, where he was introduced to us as a cyborg-appearing Wolverine villain who was hired by General Koi, another enemy of Logan's. Back then, he was just a smile and a coat with a hat on. Currently, however, his design is much different, and he doesn't even go by the name Cyber anymore, instead being known as Hornet in the comics in his newest body.
Number 10, Thunderbird. AKA John Proudstar, Thunderbird made his comic book debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, and during his childhood on the Apache Reservation in Camp Verde, Arizona, John wasn't like the other kids on the reservation. He grew up extremely strong, and he became an athlete, and at just the age of 20, his mutant powers manifested when he wrestled a charging bison with his bare hands. That's a lot of strength. Now, this earned him fame on the reservation, so much so that Charles Xavier caught wind of the young man through Cerebro and invited him to join the X-Men. The first mission John took was actually the rescue of the original X-Men from Krakoa. Xavier then gave him the nickname Thunderbird. Now, Apocalypse experimented on Thunderbird and transformed him into the Horseman of War at one point. Now, fortunately, this didn't last forever as he broke free of Apocalypse's mind control and began getting his life back together. You can find all of this in Exiles issue 1. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you haven't already, you can go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It really does help our studio out a lot. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for supporting Top 10 Nerd. Now back to this list. Number 9, Wither. Making his first appearance in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 3, Wither, aka Kevin Ford, grew up thinking he was cursed, or he was the most unlucky person on the planet. His mutant powers started to manifest, and he noticed it first in his plants and then on his clothes. See, his plants would die and his clothes would start to fade away. They would start to decay, almost wither away. Now we get it. Now, his father tried to calm him down once he realized this, but coming into contact with Kevin, well, you could have guessed what happens. He was soon discovered and was invited to join Xavier's Institute to learn how to control his wild powers of organic decay. He got close with Wallflower, aka Lori Collins, but in the House of M storyline, he touched her arm and crippled her. He ran away hurt and was soon met by Selene, the Black Queen, and she invited Wither to join her circle, and he gladly accepted. Number 8. Polaris. She's a powerful mutant who came to control magnetism, and she made her first appearance in X-Men 49 as Lorna Dane. But then in issue 97, she was Polaris. Cerebro identified her as a mutant when she stepped out of the shower and had green hair. So Iceman had a crush on her when she was part of the team, but she was in love with Havoc. Her powers are of course similar to Magneto's, but she lost them after the M-Day event as well. So when Apocalypse came into the picture, he also restored her powers as she was deemed the Horseman Pestilence. She was saved by her lover man Havoc and was also healed of Apocalypse's mind control. So again, didn't last too long, but definitely did see enough dark days. Number 7, Glob Herman. Glob Herman, aka Robert Herman, made his debut in New X-Men issue 117, and he grew up with a father who despised mutants a lot. So already we're off to a promising start. So when Glob mutated, his father was just not having it. So much so that his mother drove out Glob to Westchester and left him for Professor X. See, this mutation was interesting. His skin was this transparent living wax, which he's able to maintain being on fire, which is kind of cool. He runs with the New Mutants now, but at one point he did join the Omega Gang, led by Kid Omega, and they made their own stand for mutant rights. See, Glob wasn't a fan of the school, and he also had a grudge by the way that his father treated him. So he had a pretty harsh take on how to treat humans. Poor Glob, I mean, he had a rough childhood, not exactly his fault here at all. Number 6, Kid Omega. Okay, that guy that I just mentioned, of course, I'll fill you in a little bit on him as well and what gang that he was a part of. Quintavious Quinton Quirinius made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134, and he has been described as one of the most powerful telepaths, one of the most strongest mutants ever besides Jean Grey. He was once the host of the Phoenix Force as well, so that should give you any indication. He was one of Xavier's prized pupils until he put together the Omega Gang, which was a gang that takes out humans for the crimes they committed against mutants. He even went to a tattoo shop to get him and the gang tattoos of an Omega symbol to put over top of the X-Men symbol. So they weren't playing around here. I mean, at least try wash off tattoos first. I mean, give it some thought, you know, those things are forever. Number 5, Banshee. Making his first appearance in X-Men issue 28, Sean Cassidy was born as the heir to the castle and estate of Cassidy Keep in Ireland. Professor Xavier asked him to join the X-Men at the same time as Thunderbird, and they both stayed as members of the new X-Men. He went on to train the new generation of X-Men and Generation X, but was killed during Deadly Genesis when he tried to stop the Blackbird from crashing when it was taken over. Banshee remained one of the unliving until the Apocalypse twins resurrected him using the Death Seed, thus becoming the Horseman of Death himself. Later on, he ended up in the custody of the X-Men when Beast thought it was best to put him in a coma until the healing of Death Seed energy is complete. Number 4, Jubilee. Making her first appearance in Uncanny X-Men issue 244, Jubilee, aka Jubilation Lee, first discovered her mutant powers of generating this blinding and explosive blast from her hands. She was discovered by Dazzler, Cyclops, Rogue, and Storm during a rescue at the mall. And when she followed the women through the portal, she ended up at the X-Men's temporary base in the Australian outback. So she stayed there hiding, and then when the Reavers captured Wolverine and took over their base, she borrowed the X-Men's clothes and made a suit for herself. So she went and rescued Wolverine and aided him back to health. She's already an X-Men, look at that, just like that. So Jubilee and Wolverine ended up becoming a good pair, working missions together, and then a vampire ended up infecting the area of Union Square and Curse of the Mutants, and Jubilee, being caught in the path of this infection, ended up becoming a vampire herself. And in perfect harmony, she in the story ends up infecting Wolverine during her bloodthirsty time. And he was coming back to rescue her as well when it all happened. She's kept in a holding cell where Wolverine is really the only X-Men saying that they should keep her alive. So, rough times, rough times. Number 3, Tattoo. AKA Christine Korn, she made her first comic book debut in New X-Men issue 126. She's a student of the Xavier Institute, and she's known as Tattoo, well, because her mutation allows her to display messages or designs on her skin. And if that's not cool enough, she can phase through matter. So, coolest mutant ever, okay? She's also one of the Omega Gang members, and one time, her and the other members, led by Quentin Quire, started a riot at Xavier Institute during opening day celebrations. So Tattoo actually phased her hand into Cyclops' head, and then told him that if she became solid, he wouldn't survive to see the end of it. But then, Emma Frost reverted the trick by turning into Diamond, and then putting her hand into Tattoo's head to prevent her from taking out Cyclops. What a confusing sight to see. Superheroes are so cool. And at one point, she also attacked Beast and Wolverine, but she was being controlled by Cassandra Nova. So, number 2, Rachel Summers. She's the daughter of Scott Summers and Jean Grey in an alternate universe on Earth 811, and she makes her first appearance in X-Men 141, the Days of Future Past story. So she was born from the Phoenix Force merging with Jean, so she got the abilities of a telepath and of a telekinetic. She was raised at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters when she met Franklin Richards and became really close. Now one day the school was attacked by federal troops and she was one of the only survivors. She was taken in by the crazy Ahab, where she was brainwashed and became the mutant Hound, where she used her psionic powers to hunt down other mutants. Her time as this horrible mutant hunter weighed heavy on her conscience afterwards. I mean, she even got her face marked up by these guys. It was just an all bad situation. And finally, number 1. Pyro. Pyro was once a student at the Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, and in X2 we see him hanging out with Iceman and Rogue. By the end of the movie, he switches over to Magneto's side, facing off against Bobby. And in the comics, Simon Lasker makes his first appearance as Pyro in X-Men Gold Volume 2 Issue 1, when Mesmero tricks him into believing he's Charles Xavier and he joins the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So not good on screen, not good in the comic books. Still a cool character, just likes to dip into the dark side.
Number 10, Bishop. As some of you pointed out in the comments on the part 1 of this list, a lot of 90s characters, especially 90s X-Men, have completely different looks in the modern day when compared with their 90s appearances. Lucas Bishop is definitely one such character. Although he still has his M tattoo over his eye and a few details in his costume that pay homage to his original look, Bishop has definitely seen some changes, some of which might be so great that fans may not at first recognize him. While he still often is seen with his XSE guns and even still sports a red bandana, Bishop is now a member of the Marauders. Gone are the days of those 90s X-Men colors, and modern day Bishop dresses mainly in reds and blacks, in homage as well to his role as the Hellfire Trading Company's Red Bishop. Also, I love that Bishop is the Red Bishop because he's a bishop and his name's Bishop, it's crazy. Number 9, Crystal. Crystal's initial appearance had her recognizable mainly by her ginger or strawberry blonde hair and a simple white dress. I personally always thought of Crystal as being ginger, but then I see so many different versions of her where she has like maybe blonde hair. So I don't know, but I've always thought of her as a ginger. She is known for being the younger sister of Medusa, who is the Inhuman Queen and true love of Black Bolt. Crystal has had a few different looks, but generally she has longer ginger hair and is either in a yellow suit or a Fantastic Four suit when she was, you know, on that team. She has been known for dating Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, was once married to Quicksilver and had a daughter with him, and she was even for a time married to Ronan the Accuser. Yeah, it's been an interesting dating history, I feel like, for Crystal. All in all, Crystal has had a sort of wild life, and while her costume has changed gradually, comparing her short blonde haired self in her yellow and black diamond suit to her first appearance with long ginger-like hair in her white dress, looks like a dress to me, and you might not know it's Crystal at first glance. And friends, if you want even more lists where we talk about all the glow ups in comics and I guess some of the glow downs, if that's a thing, be sure to let us know that you love this list by giving it a thumbs up. Number 8, Pyro. Pyro might be sporting a very similar suit when it comes to how he looked in his first appearance, but he also now has a skull tattoo. A full face skull tattoo. And honestly, I have come to love it. Not only that, but this version of Pyro was also originally known as a villain, and like many on the island nation of Krakoa, has been given a new lease on life where he no longer needs to be a villain. Instead, recently, Pyro has exclusively acted as a hero, fighting alongside his shipmates and teammates, the Marauders. During his time with the Marauders team, St. John Allardyce ended up taking refuge with his fellow teammates in a tattoo parlor. A few of them decided to get tats while they were there, Pyro included. He decided to get a full face tattoo, getting a black skull tattooed over top his face. And I gotta say, it's just been growing on me more and more every time I read Marauders. At first, after he got this tat, I was expecting, like so many other Krakoans, that Pyro would end up dying and then being resurrected, erasing the tattoo from his face. After all, who needs tattoo removal when you have resurrection protocols, and mutants dying and returning is no longer really a big deal at all. Although I'm sure the Healing Gardens could remove Pyro's tattoo almost as easily. Still, he hasn't gotten it removed or died and been brought back without it yet, so while you might wonder who that is with the skull face tattoo, it seems that it's becoming part of Pyro's modern day look quite seamlessly. So maybe in 10 years from now we'll be like, oh yeah, it's Pyro because the skull face tattoo. Maybe he'll still have it. Number 7. Flash Thompson, or as he's currently known, Agent Anti-Venom. Still, it's pretty wild to think that Flash Thompson, aka Eugene Thompson, started out as Peter Parker's bully back in the day. Flash has come a long way from being an antagonist to a friend of Peter's to a full-on war hero and later superhero. He's battled alcoholism, became an amputee, and even traveled into space where he fought alongside the Guardians of the Galaxy. If you only knew Flash from his first appearance, or vice versa, you only knew him from modern day comics, you'd probably be shocked to see just how different the character is, how far he has come, and how much he has grown and evolved. He even became such a popular character among fans that he got to join the Resurrection Club, being returned to life recently after dying during the fight against Red Goblin. Number 6. Cable. In recent years, Cable has had a completely new look considering that his old version died and was replaced with his younger version. Of course, his older version has since returned, but there was a good amount of time there in the comics when you might have been confused as to just who exactly you were reading about. Is Kid Cable meant to be Nathan's son, you might have thought, or is he some like de-aged version of Nathan Summers? Well, the latter is the correct assumption if you made it. Young Cable actually hunted his older self down, in essence completing his time loop. But of course, the old man still existed out there, and if you went to the right point and place in time, he would still be living earlier portions of his life. As such, we were able to bring Old Man Cable back in the comics, and young Cable actually realized that he would also have to leave and let the old man basically take over, as while he thought he knew it all, young and all, that's what young people usually think. They think they know it all. It turns out he still has lots to learn. Honestly though, I love both versions of Cable, and I wish that old Cable could team up with his younger self on more occasions. I want like a Kid Cable and Old Man Cable team up comic. Number 5. Speedball, or as he was known for a good amount of time in the comics, Penance. Robert Baldwin initially got his powers after a lab experiment went awry. After being exposed to extra-dimensional radiation, Robbie found that when he was the target of a certain amount of force, his body would transform. Instead of him being harmed from said blow, he would produce a protective barrier, causing him to become basically like a human bouncy ball. He could use this energy to then shield others, blast opponents, or to even halt speeding projectiles in midair. Speedball would later join the New Warriors. However, later on, he would be part of an incident at the center of the First Civil War, where 612 civilians were killed, including 60 children. This would prompt him to change in appearance and in mindset, becoming Penance, a spiky armored version of the character who had internal spikes in his suit to remind him of all the victims lost, as he felt personally responsible for their deaths. Speedball has since returned to his original appearance, but it has taken him time to recover both physically and mentally from his time as Penance. And he's kinda still on that road to recovery. He was Penance for a long time. Number 4. Angel. Angel is another mutant superhero who has gone through a ton of different looks in life. Most notably was his shift from having organic wings to techno-organic wings after he lost his organic wings when he became one of Apocalypse's horsemen. The crazy thing is that while Angel seems to appear as mostly his original version, there are times where you might be confused with him as to who is who, as he seems to kind of alternate right now in modern comics between his original form and his techno-organic form, Archangel. As far as I can tell, this hasn't been fully explained yet in the comics, though it has been acknowledged that this happens in a similar manner to his X-Corp partner, Monet. That is, when he gets more emotional or gets more angry, his techno-organic form seems to come out. This was alluded to at the end of issue 2 of X-Corp, their Hellfire Gala issue. And if there have been more explanations on this and I missed them, please feel free to tell me what issues I should in-depth read, because yeah, I feel like there's little details, but we haven't gotten like a full, here's how it is, let me break it down for you. Number 3. Nick Fury. While Nick Fury does look very different in modern day comics in comparison to classic comics, it is important to note that technically these are 2 different characters. Well, technically these are kind of like 3 different characters. or 4 different characters. There's a lot of characters. The version of Nick Fury we saw in the MCU was actually inspired by the version of the character from the Ultimate Universe, who, fun fact, was also inspired in terms of appearances by Samuel L. Jackson, the very man who would end up playing him. In fact, a lot of the MCU characterization and even stories are inspired by the Ultimate Universe, the alternate reality of 1610, and the stories that went on there. The original Nick Fury of Earth 616 was actually a white man, but he would inevitably be replaced by a 1610 inspired alternate Fury after the original Nick Fury of 616 ended up kind of being transformed into a Watcher. The 1610 version of Fury and Samuel L. Jackson's take on the character would then be adapted for Earth 616, the main comic book continuity, and that's how we would get Nick Fury Jr., who is the son of the original Nick Fury from the comics and looks a lot like Jackson's 1610 inspired version from the MCU. See what I mean? There's lots of Nick Furies. People are like, Nick Fury changed, and I'm like, Nick Fury didn't change, there's just a lot of characters that came together. Number 2, Beast. Beast is one character that has gone through a massive amount of change since we first met Hank McCoy, the lovable vocabularian, scientist, and the X-Men's most bouncy team member, Beast. Back then, Hank was just a relatively large man with enormous feet and enormous hands, but his mutation continued to progress long after that first appearance, changing when he ended up forced to take a serum that he had created based around the hormone that causes mutation. As such, he mutated even farther, which became permanent after he didn't take the antidote quickly enough to thereafter revert the effects. This meant that Hank was now permanently even more muscular, agile, and now completely covered head to toe in gray fur. From there, his fur would become more blue, and over the years his appearance has become borderline lion-like or even kind of cat-like at times. Number 1, Star-Lord. Considering how much Peter Quill has changed with each era of comics, it could be hard for fans to recognize him in modern day. Once again, his appearance and power levels have changed so much. In his initial appearance compared to his modern look, he's basically unrecognizable. And if we go even farther back to the Peter Jason Quill of the 1970s, the Star-Lord of Earth 791 now, he is completely different. It should be noted though that shortly after the main continuity version was introduced in Thanos issue number 8, which came out in 2004, he was shortly after pretty radically changed when he appeared a few years later in Annihilation Conquest from 2007 to 2008, which is pretty much the version of Quill roughly that we have today. Although even then, he's still changed quite a bit. Quill more recently in the comics returned from Marinus, an extra-dimensional world where he lived unaging with his friends, partners, and his lovers, Mors and Aradia, for hundreds of years. He came back even more powerful than before he had left, and ended up joining forces once more with the Guardians of the Galaxy to defend the cosmos against the return of the Dark Olympians. Which changes are you in love with when it comes to characters, appearances, or their alignments? And which, if any, are you not really feeling? Let us know in the comments below. Number 10, All-Female X-Men. Oddly enough, this book didn't do as hot as expected, despite the fact that it was an awesome powerhouse team composed of all ladies. This team was first introduced in 2013's X-Men series in issue number 1, as one of the main X-Men teams, and the series was part of the Marvel Now event. The team featured Kitty Pryde, Rogue, Rachel Summers, Jubilee, and Psylocke, with Storm as the leader. This team was the first in the history of the X-Men to be an all-female team with its own book. So while it was not a commercial success, it's still an important part of X-Men history to be noted for sure. Number 9, Chuck Austin's Uncanny X-Men. At least I kind of hope you've never heard of this one, because if you have, you probably just forgot about it after years of trying, and now I'm traumatizing you by bringing it back up. This is the team that featured Stacy X. Yeah. I like Stacy X, but I can also see why her character and this run were super problematic. Austin's run on Uncanny X-Men began in issue 410 and ran till issue 443. The problem here wasn't so much to do with the members of the team as the subject matter. Many people feel that Austin's run was hypersexual, and he also gave us the revelation that Nightcrawler's dad was Azazel, which honestly isn't that terrible, but then he also gave us the weird Draco storyline with the X-Men versus the Neopham, which was something. It was a time. All in, this was definitely a controversial run, especially considering the relationship between Husk and Angel. The team was made up of Archangel, Beast, Iceman, Nightcrawler, Stacy X, Wolverine, and Professor X himself to start, but it would later on feature Husk, Polaris, Northstar, Juggernaut, and Havoc. Before we move on to this next spot, just a quick little reminder to click that like button if you haven't already, it really does help us out. Number 8, Children of the Atom. You might not have heard of this one because it isn't even out yet, but this is one of the new teams and books that we had expected to see earlier this year, but due to the global pandemic was delayed and is now delayed again. Originally it was moved to January of 2021, but now we aren't expected to see it till April of 2021. Boy, that is a long wait. But just because they aren't around yet doesn't mean we can't talk about them. And if you haven't heard of this team yet, you might want to keep your eye out for when their book is released. Children of the Atom is a team of new teen mutants who are basically X-Men superfans and are trained by these very famous original mutants. Technically, the X-Men team was never meant to exist in Krakoa, as was just revealed recently in the comics, despite them having their own book as part of the Dawn of X line. I know, it's a little confusing. So it'll be interesting to see how the Children of the Atom, who are being advertised as kind of X-Men sidekicks, fit in exactly. In a world where, you know, there's not really supposed to be X-Men? Well, we have yet to meet the members of this team. We do know some of them not only have similar costumes to the classic X-Men, but also have similar powers. Number 7, Hellions. No, not that Hellions. This Hellions. In fact, Empath's look in the new Hellions was a throwback to the original Hellions team outfits. Empath was also an original member of the team. Before we saw the team revived in Dawn of X, they were Emma Frost's team. Basically her version of a teenage mutant team similar to, well, the New Mutants. We're also a teenage mutant team. Every time I say teenage mutant team, I just want to say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but that's not what we're talking about. Although they are also a teenage mutant team. In comparison to the new Hellions, these Hellions were not as crazy, but were somewhat troublemakers, who had an ongoing, sometimes friendly rivalry with the New Mutants themselves. The team consisted of Empath, Beef, Bevatron, Cat's Eye, Roulette, Taro, Thunderbird, Jetstream, and Firestart. The team was first introduced in New Mutants issue number 16 in the 1980s and was disbanded in 2009 in the comics after most of them were basically slaughtered, victims of a surprise attack. The team has returned since, but the new Hellions team only shares one member of the original roster, Empath. Number 6, X Corporation. Many people may have forgotten the existence of X Corporation since the organization was destroyed and became defunct back in the early 2000s, but they are coming back, so it's a pretty good time to remind everyone of their existence. Reminder, X Corp is still a thing. This actually just happened in the comics during the Empire event when we saw for certain that Xavier had revived the X Corp and that Monet and Angel seem to be running this branch of mutant affairs. X Corp in the past has been a non-for-profit organization working to help mutants in their fight for rights in less bold ways than what the X-Men are usually up to. It also provided a place of refuge for mutants who needed it, until the global organization had their various branches targeted and blown up around the globe following the events of M-Day. X-Corp will be getting their own book in the Dawn of X line, which I am way too excited about. I just want to see Angel get a moment in the spotlight, you know? Many believe the book to have been cancelled, but Jonathan Hickman actually confirmed early in December that it is still very much a go. Number 5, X-Men The End. In this series, we saw a bunch of teams kind of come together, ending in one big one, and Chris Claremont's The End. I like this X-Men team as well because although she died pretty early on in terms of her appearance here, we also get a shout out at least to Dust. And Dust is such an underrated X-Men in my opinion. This comic also introduces us to the future daughter of Bishop and Deathbird, Aaliyah Bishop. The final X-Men team features Kitty Pryde, Wolfsbane, Karma, North Star, Dust, Martha Johansson aka No Girl, the Cuckoos, Cyclops, and a subgroup known as the Heavy Hitters, which features Wither, Frenzy, Polaris, Juggernaut, and Kid Colossus. Number 4, the Upstarts. Speaking of young mutant teams that are lesser known like the Hellions, we also have their straight up not friendly at all rivals, the Upstarts. The Upstarts were definitely a more villainous crew in comparison to the Hellions, just in general, as their whole goal was to basically kill mutants. The Upstarts were a mutant team created by Selene, the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club. She put the team together in order to test the members, getting them to compete for points which would be awarded whenever they killed mutants, based on the mutants' power set. Originally, the young group of mutants involved were unnamed and were promised that whoever got the most points would win a prize, which remained a mystery pretty much through all of the comics that they were featured in. I bet it's cake, and I bet it's Although I think it was also mentioned at one point somewhere that it was immortality, so in case you were wondering, for realsies. Number 3. Battle of the Atom Future X-Men. While everyone might focus on the Battle of the Atom Future Brotherhood team, as Reyes has a tendency to steal the show, plus my girl Zorn Jean, and also featuring Molly Hayes, people tend to forget about the awesomeness that was the Future X-Men team. The real X-Men team. This team featured a much more skilled Iceman, who now was known as Ice Wizard, Wiccan, who had become Sorcerer Supreme, Chimera, who is believed to be Storm's daughter that she had with Black Panther, Shogo, Jubilee's son, known as Sentinel X, Colossus armed with Magic Soul Sword, Kid Omega as Phoenix, and Jubilee as Wolverine. Number 2. Extreme Sanctions Executive, the other XSE. This team also spiraled out of the team that we talked about previously on part 1 of this list, Extreme X-Men. XSE here stands for the Extreme Sanctions Executive. Similar to the original XSE that Bishop was a part of in the future, this team is also like a military police force meant to maintain and in some cases enforce peace is kept between mutants and humans. Storm was asked to create the team by the United Nations and eventually would increase its numbers by recruiting the rest of her X-Men, making this team another government-sanctioned mutant team, like X-Factor was, and still one of the first of those types of teams. Team members have included Bishop, Cannonball, Magma, Rachel Summers is on every team, I love it, Psylocke, Rogue, Sage, Wolverine, X-23, and Gambit. Number 1. X-Animals. If you're an intense X-Men fan, you may be familiar with Mojo's X-Babies, but are you familiar with his other attempts at recreating or recasting Marvel's 616 X-Men after they were believed dead? One such team that attempted to step in was the X-Animals. This was a team of, well, animals, who each took on the role of a different mutant member of the X-Men. We've got a skunk standing in for Rogue, a bulldog for Wolverine, a pig for Dazzler, a rabbit as Havoc, a cat for our Storm, which I kinda love, a bird, possibly a hawk as Longshot, an otter as Psylocke, and a gorilla as Colossus. Sadly, this team was not acceptable as a replacement in Mojo's opinion, and he got rid of them. But I'd love to see them return at some point, if that's possible. There are just so many X teams to keep track of and so many rosters. I think it can be especially hard when there are various X-Men teams operating all at once across like multiple different books and runs, and potentially timelines. It's a lot, and there's always stuff you're going to miss, which is why it's really fun to go back through history and see what you maybe missed out on at the time because you were busy reading something else. I honestly wish I could read every single issue of every single X book, but truly there is just not enough time in the day, but I can definitely try though. Number 10. Storm. Storm has had many different looks throughout the years, and depending on which era of Storm you are most familiar with, you might not recognize her right away when it comes to her appearances in modern day comics. When I think of Storm, one of the most iconic looks I think of is her very different 80s punk rocker look, where she's sporting a bright white mohawk. For me, this look is still one of the first ones that I think of even today. Even if you go back to her first appearance, she looks pretty different in comparison even to the 80s look. The cool thing about the modern day Storm look is that it seems to sort of incorporate all of these looks that have come before while also being quite unique. It's an homage to the past while not discounting the very real possibility of a grander future. That's actually what I like when it comes to a lot of the X-Men's updated looks. It's all about acknowledging the past while also using said past to fuel and motivate the future. Storm's initial appearance, her 80s look, and of course the now. Number 9. Venom. You wouldn't recognize Venom today compared to his 90s appearance either. For one, Venom initially appeared as a villain and therefore not only looked different but also acted quite differently. And now if we're talking about hosts that we associate with Venom, they're also pretty different in terms of their appearance. Currently, the Venom symbiote is teamed up with Eddie Brock's son, Dylan Brock. Oh yeah, if you've been out of comics for a while, Eddie Brock also has a son now. Dylan is actually Anne and Eddie's son, with a little mix-in of Venom as well, who was also there when he was conceived. And if we're talking about Venom in terms of Eddie Brock, you might not recognize him either. He's aged considerably as a result of him becoming the new King in Black following that King in Black event where Null was defeated and Eddie took his place. That was Venom and Eddie Brock then, and that is who Venom is attached to now, and what Eddie looks like now. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about all of the changes in comics, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Echo. Echo is Maya Lopez. When she first appeared, she was a villain who didn't even know that she was a villain in the story. She ended up fighting against Daredevil after being misled and made to believe that he was the one responsible for killing her father. She wasn't really a villain though, she was just like a misguided person. Echo's really, I think, always been a hero deep down. When we first see her, she wears bandages on her arms, possibly an allusion to her one-woman dance show, which is actually based on her life, which was all about how she felt like an Echo. Also, yes, there are many things that Echo is skilled at because her power is like Taskmaster's. She can acquire a physical skill simply by watching it, so she's not just an amazing fighter and martial artist, but she's also a great dancer too. Echo currently in the comics has shown up in the Avengers. She is now the new Phoenix in the comics, having won the opportunity and burden of being bonded with the Phoenix Force during the Phoenix tournament. In fact, Maya in the tournament didn't actually win, but instead was chosen because she had lost the most. The Phoenix Force was looking for a fallen champion apparently, not a big time winner. Echo as the Phoenix looks quite different than her initial appearance, no? I think it's like the Phoenix Flames for me. She still has those bandages though, and she's still got her face paint with her hand. Number 7. Iceman. When Iceman originally came on the scene, he had a very different look. If we go back to his first appearance in X-Men issue number 1, he was actually more like a snowman than an Iceman. Iceman in his early days wasn't quite as frozen solid and was more like an anthropomorphic but faceless snowman in battle. He didn't wear a trademark X-Men uniform, but he did put on his little black booties, which were kind of like, I guess, X-Men trademark uniform booties, because they're black and yellow, and there was a lot of black and yellow coloring with those original uniforms. This meant that Iceman was always the one who had to help Angel get dressed, as Warren had to deal with his wings, both unbinding them and then of course fitting them through his uniform holes, I imagine. We'd later learn in Marvel's Voices Pride from 2021 that Bobby was actually pretty happy to help, as he had a bit of a crush on Warren back in the day. Iceman since then has had a major glow up and appears to look like an ice prince in modern day comics. He even has cool spiky pauldrons. Spiky pauldrons. He's also had a glow up in terms of his powers too. Woo! Number 6. Hulkling. Hulkling is another hero who looks pretty different from his first appearance. He used to have a bunch of ear piercings, but I guess he can shapeshift, so it was easy for him to close them all up. I guess he was just like, I'm not into it now, and they're gone. Hulkling was much more gruff looking, I'd say, in his first appearance with the Young Avengers. However, he also had the name Hulkling. I mean, he still has that name, but I know that name has nothing to do really with the Hulk, but still, in his original appearance, he's big, he's green, and he's kind of like the Young Avengers' own version of that character, because, you know, everyone's kind of mirroring someone. Though to be fair, Teddy Altman is very much his own character and his own person, like many of the other Young Avengers. Currently in the comics, Hulkling isn't just a hero, but is also the Emperor of the Skrull/Kree Alliance. The Skree Alliance, if you like. And this new role has also dramatically changed his overall outfit and appearance. He looks super cute now, not that he didn't before, of course. He's just a different kind of cute now than he was before. Also, he has totally different hair. His hair now is blonde. It was black, but also shapeshifter, you know what I mean? Number 5. Dazzler. Alison Blair has had a ton of different looks over the years, and there have been countless points in her history when you may have not recognized her. If you've been invested in modern comics for some time, then Alison's current outfit is Dazzler, which she also sported in Way of X issue number 3, the morning after the Hellfire Gala, will likely be recognizable to you. However, if the last time you saw her was in, her own solo series back in the 80s, then you might be confused as to even who this character is. And if you saw her back in 2015 and were familiar with either the present or past appearances of Dazzler, or if you're familiar with that Dazzler, I really doubt that you would recognize her in the present day. There's many times when you'd be like, who is that, depending on which Dazzler you know. There has been a tendency to try and have Allison change with music trends, instead of keeping her in her somewhat, I guess, outdated disco roots. But personally, I think disco can still be a valid ballad genre today. I still love disco, and I'd love to see her even return to that iconic silver jumpsuit. I like that Dazzler's had so many different looks, that's crazy. Number 4. Professor X. When we think of Professor X, usually a lot of us probably reflect back to his look in the 90s animated series. In fact, many X-Men fans who have seen Professor X recently would probably wonder just who they're even looking at. If you are more familiar with his appearance in the 90s, both in the animated series and in the comics, the modern Professor X might throw you for a loop. Currently, Professor X is able to walk again and happens to be sporting not a suit and, a blanket on his lap, but instead an all-black, skin-tight one piece. Also, he always wears Cerebro now, obscuring his recognizable face and his bald head. But yeah, that was Professor X then, and this is him now. Number 3. Nature Girl. Nature Girl is amazing. She's one of my favorite of the newer mutants to come out, and recently she has become a lot more metal, both in approach and in her appearance. Nature Girl can basically commune with nature, which often means she can encourage animals to help her, and they actually seem to feel within Nature Girl a kindred spirit. So there's a lot of empathy going on there between both sides. More recently in the X-Men Unlimited Infinity comics, we saw that Nature Girl has been in a constant state of depression and duress, feeling the pain that all nature is currently feeling due to humans polluting and just generally mucking up the planet and its natural and carefully balanced ecosystems. This forced Nature Girl to go on an adventure to fight for what she believes in, which resulted in her kind of accidentally killing someone and then losing all of her hair, just sporting her antlers as she turned to the dark side and took on oiling operations, aiming to destroy them and anyone who wouldn't renounce their loyalty to them. This is not your friendly neighborhood Nature Girl, that's for sure. Nature Girl then, Nature Girl now. I love her new dark look though. I love both versions of Nature Girl. I think Nature Girl's awesome. Number 2. Captain Britain, or more specifically Betsy Braddock. Whether we're looking at things from the point of view as the hero mantle of Captain Britain, or looking at it from the character viewpoint of Betsy Braddock, either way, Betsy is looking pretty different now. For a good amount of time in the comics, Betsy was known for looking just like Quanon, because, well, she was kind of in Quanon's body, or they were kind of fused together at one point. Fortunately, she has now been restored to her own body, freeing Quanon and allowing Quanon to take up the Psylocke mantle. Betsy then went on to become the new Captain Britain in her brother Brian Braddock's place after he was ensorcelled by Morgan Le Fay, becoming her new Dark Knight. It was up to Betsy at that point to take Brian's amulet and become the new Captain Britain until Brian could be saved. Betsy has been shattered and managed to return and is still known as Captain Britain currently. Even though Brian also got free, but then Brian was like, you take it, I'm good, I'm gonna do other stuff. You don't have a lot going on right now, Betsy, so take a thing and then make it your own thing. I like it. Number 1. Captain Kate. Even Kitty Pryde's name has shifted somewhat. She's been known by a few different names in the comics: Shadowcat, Sprite, Kitty Pryde. Now, however, she prefers if you just call her Kate. Captain Kate is the Red Queen of the Hellfire Trading Company, and typically dresses in red as such. But not only that, she also typically dresses kind of piratey now. I personally love it. This is because Kate is now also the leader of the Marauders, who have reclaimed this one villainous name and are basically a pirate crew who sail the seas, bringing those mutants to Krakoa who want to be there, but who for one reason or another can't get there. They also help deliver and intercept shipments of goods as necessary. So the whole look really fits with what Kate is up to currently in the comics, but it is very different from her original or even her past looks. Kate before, Kate now. Although I will say that original outfit that she's wearing with like the red vest and like the stripy shirt, I was like, is there already like pirate vibes that were kind of carried over here? I don't know.